Afghan kitchen popping up.
What?
And they've suddenly got, you know, loads and loads of Afghan people suddenly, because they're all living on MOD property, which we didn't really know they were doing. But they've been trying to tell people about it and nobody listened.
Astonishing piece in the Telegraph today suggesting that only 1 in 16 who have come across might be people who should credibly be here. 1 in 16?
Exactly.
And the other 15 are going to bring all their families. And who on earth are they?
And many of them are shysters, thieves and all the rest of it. Another story. 10 o'clock. Coming up, Alex Phillips for the next 3 hours. Playing the week tonight, 7. I'll see you Monday.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and good morning to you. This is Alex Phillips. I'm here with you in my normal slot until 1 o'clock to keep you entertained and updated with what is going on in our fair country. Doesn't seem very fair to me, and I think that is the problem. A lot of people seem to be getting rather hot under the collar at the unfairness of it all. We circle back round every time, don't we, to who's been allowed into this country and the sort of wonderful welcome and red carpet rollout we are giving them as we are taxed to the hilt and treated like scumbags and called far right. Well, tensions seem to be boiling over down in Epping Forest, as you know, because no doubt you've been tuned in from the early hours this morning. We're going to be talking about that, and by gum, do I have some thoughts to share. In fact, I was nodding off last night in my sleep. This is how much I think about work. I sort of had my eye mask on and my decaf Earl Grey. And I was lying there, and just as I was entering that sort of hypnopompic world of strange kaleidoscopic images, I could hear a sort of monologue coming out, all fitting together. And I thought to myself, I hope I remember this in the morning to tell my wonderful audience. And guess what? I don't. But let's just see if I can somehow recreate it a little bit later, because we are going to be talking about this topic in detail. Should people be protesting? Have they every right? Is this going to erupt into more violence? Is that condonable? I'd say it never is, quite frankly. But what other choice do they have? What choice are people left with today? We haven't been listened to for not just years, decades. Decades. And it's going on still. It's cultural vandalism. It's really hard to say when things are getting a little bit steamy out there, but, you know, you've got to understand that if you don't give people a voice at a ballot box, if you repeatedly ignore them, if you use things like super injunctions, then there is going to be some form of a backlash. And I would say this, mark my words, when you see what is happening in other countries around Europe. So far, we're getting off lightly. Sir Keir Starmer's extreme heavy-handedness in the wake of the Southport massacre may have had an effect of potentially dialing down tensions or making people think twice before they go out and demonstrate here in the United Kingdom. But how long will that hold? How long will the cork stay in the bottle as the bottle is repeatedly shaken up? We're also going to be talking about all of these people who have come over from Afghanistan, with the Telegraph reporting potentially as few as 1 in 16. 1 in 16 are credible and have every right to be here, which means 15 out of 16 are not, and now they are all using a law firm, which is sending, I looked at it on my phone this morning, a law firm called Bearings up in Manchester, which if you go on their website, they're bombarding you with these pop-ups and adverts going, are you an Afghan? Do you want to sue the UK government for a data breach? Do you want to apply to come and live in Britain? And I'm thinking, it's not the UK government you're suing. Whenever we hear, oh, sue the government's made a mistake, oh, the government should pay. No. That's us. That's you, my friend. Yeah, if you've paid taxes, if you part with cash to the National Treasury, then you are the one being sued, technically, aren't you? You're the one who's going to have to pay that bill for people who might be trying it on, for people who may not have even met a British or American soldier, for people who might even have a relationship with the Taliban, Lord knows, because given this data breach, I'm not sure how much I trust the security and vetting. I'm not sure how watertight the process is. We're also going to be speaking to Dame Andrea Jenkins coming up in the programme. And then later on, I'm going to have the incredible Niall Gardner, who's a former advisor to Margaret Thatcher and a foreign policy analyst over at the Heritage Foundation in America, here in the studios to tell us everything going on the other side of the pond. And yes, our favourite time of year, the wonderful Notting Hill Carnival. That amazing street theatre of diversity and inclusion and celebration and peace and calm and joy. Oh, it comes back to the West London postcode yet again, which means my boyfriend's mum's going to have to pack her bags in GTFO, because there'll probably be people urinating in her doorstep and taking hippie crack in her front garden. Oh, can't wait for that. But don't worry, it's all going to be fine this year, because they're going to use a bit of facial recognition. That's going to stop all of the knife crime, isn't it? So lots coming up on the programme. Oh, and of course, the brilliant Kinsey Schofield. We love her. She's going to be bringing some Californian sparkle and sharp-tongued gossip to today's programme. What are you going to bring? That's what I want to know. That is a big question on my lips today. What are your thoughts on everything going on? Because we want to hear them. And if you want to share them, the number is 0344 499 1000. It's charged at your normal network rate. So basically, doesn't really cost you anything more than a normal phone call, does it? That's what I like to call free therapy. You'd have to wait for years with the NHS to get the sort of catharsis we're able to offer here in Talk Towers. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you'd rather send a text message, it is 87222. And if you're going to do that, you've got to write the word talk before you send your text. We're on X at talkTV, and you'll have to excuse me because I've got an there we go, a little unseasonal summer cold from somewhere. I'm all bunged up. I'm feeling rather sorry for myself. So if I have to keep pausing to cough and splutter, then it's because the lurgy has managed to find me even in mid-July. All right, let's get a little bit of help then, shall we, and give my voice a break and speak to Lord Peter Lilly, former Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. Good morning to you, Lord Lilly. Let's talk about these protesters. This has been going on for a few days now in Essex. Rumours that, well, actually, he's been charged, a particular Ethiopian inhabitant of the Bell Hotel in Epping, within 8 days of being here, was charged with, improprietous behaviour towards young women. He's denied trying to kiss a 14-year-old girl when he appeared at Chelmsford Magistrates Court Thursday last week. But the locals in the area have said enough is enough. The value, the safety, the integrity of our little girls is more important, and we don't want these people here anymore. Do they have a point, or are they getting whipped up into hostilities when actually they should be trying to show a little bit of compassion to the residents of the Bell Hotel?
Well, they certainly have a point. No one should be tolerated molesting and aggressing young girls, whatever their nationality or status here. Obviously, people shouldn't take it out on the police, above all, who have the onerous task of trying to keep the peace when people are very upset about things like this, and understandably upset. But if they want to express their fury, the fury should be expressed at those who've defended mass immigration over the years and who won't allow Parliament to take back control of our laws from foreign courts.
Yeah, I wonder how they go about doing that, though, because, you know, these people, they live locally in the area. They seem to be congregating outside the hotel. I think there's been a certain degree of agitation coming from the usual cohort on the other side who turn up to anything, almost seemingly wanting to poke the bear in the zoo. The far left protesters, the anti-racism mob who turned up and certainly added a bit more spice to the event in the early days of it. But the problem is, where do the British people go now? Because you would imagine that after 2016, that big Brexit ballot, which is really at the height of Angela Merkel saying, come on, come all, we can do this together. And Nigel Farage had that poster showing the big snake of men all coming into Europe, and he said, it's us next. And everyone said, you're a racist. What a disgusting poster. Do you like this poster? Would you disown this poster? But he was right, wasn't he? And the people voted to say, we don't want this happening to the country. And it has. And so they've repeatedly at the ballot box been ignored. The Conservative government have done nothing about it. The Labour government seems to be making matters worse. And so you kind of think, what are they left with?
Understand their frustration. I've been campaigning against this since 2004, when Tony Blair started opening the door. Well, he started immediately in 1997 when he was elected, opening the door to much more immigration from outside Europe. Then from 2004, he opened our borders to mass migration from the new countries of Eastern Europe. And the theory was that he asserted that this would be good for growth and it would deal with shortages in our market. 20 years later, we've had the highest level of migration in our history and the lowest level of growth since the Middle Ages. And far from shortages being filled, they've grown worse. Because, of course, people who come into this country don't only work, they consume. So they create as much demand for additional workers as they're assuaged by their own work. So we've just got to get some reason and rationality and overcome the people who simply want to destroy this country and change its nature.
But that's what's going on. I mean, the thing is with economic problems, however bad they get, you know, Britain came through the 1970s and managed to bounce back under, of course, the wonderful Margaret Thatcher. And you kind of think with economic issues, there is always the potential of light at the end of the tunnel. There's a way of sorting it out. But with issues of social integration, of cultural cohesion, of rapidly changing demographics, of people coming into the country of extremely different social mores to us, very often competing social mores, I'm not sure quite how that is then ironed out. I'm not sure how we lance the friction, lance the toxicity from that. And I just see things getting worse. And I don't know where we go from here. I mean, it's a big ask, but if you were still deputy leader, let's say right now, what would you be saying needs to happen?
We've got to stop both the inflow, the legal inflow, which is the largest in numbers, and the illegal inflow, which is the most infuriating to people because they, you know, it is an invasion. And we can do that. I look back to see the figures when Mrs. Thatcher was Prime Minister. She was Prime Minister for 12 years, and the level of immigration, net immigration, was net zero over those 12 years. We can and should go back to zero. And we've got to control people coming from abroad. We can only do that if we take back control of our own laws and institute something like the Rwanda system, but without the power of the courts to set it aside. And that power has been given to them by Parliament under the Human Rights Act and under the European Convention for Human Rights. And we've got to change those things. Government sort of tweaking at the edges, but almost certainly that will have negligible effect.
But even if we suddenly say we're going to unearth, pull up at the root, the Human Rights Act, if we're going to leave the ECHR, if we're going to actually somehow repeal all of the canon of case history that has been used so far to make sure people can bring their family over, their kids, their dogs, their next door neighbour's grandmother's former babysitter, even if we manage to unearth all of that stuff, the problem is we already have a significant number of people here, no one seems to be able to put an actual figure on it, who are now statistically being demonstrated, not far from all, of course, but disproportionately being responsible for certain crimes. I mean, here we have hundreds of asylum seekers living in tax-funded hotels charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and GBH. Court records show at least 1 in every 100 migrants housed in these hotels have been hauled in front of magistrates. 1 in 100. Those in hotels. I mean, there's more than 100 people coming over to the country in a boat every day. If one of every single one of those is going to, I don't know, rape, rob and beat someone up, we're in big trouble in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, and I wish I could undo the past, but I can't. So we must stop things getting worse and stop them firmly and speedily. Well, we're not going to do that under this government, I think, unless it feels absolutely threatened in every seat in the country. And we've got to try and integrate those people who are here and sort out those who've got no right here and can be sent home. But that involves major legal changes and major changes in the sort of strength of the spine of our political and, I dare say, media class. And I've been saying these things for 20-odd years. I published a pamphlet in 2005 to this effect, since when I haven't been on the BBC. I can get on to your esteemed medium. Now you exist, but you didn't exist back in 2005. So we got to change the media coverage. We got to change the political tone, and then take robust, firm and immediate action.
I absolutely agree, and I also agree that these governments have not got the will or the backbone to do anything about it, which makes me wonder how things are going to accelerate in the next 4 years, and quite if these are the beginnings of demonstrations against the mass influx of men in particular from Muslim countries, how things are going to change in the future. And you hear people often talk about we've got to integrate people. It's easy to say, well, it's not easy, no one's got the answer of we've got to bring down inflation, we've got to grow the economy, but at least there are sort of mathematical sums you can do and spreadsheets you can make and models that you can work with to try and figure out how that might best be done. But integrating people, it's kind of like this amorphous concept, because as far as I'm concerned, if I went over right now to go and live in, I don't know, Oman or something, well, I might respect the local laws and orders. I might start donning a hijab and covering up my ankles and the like, and probably not sort of, I don't know, drinking alcohol in the streets and, well, maybe anywhere at all. But I probably would never fully integrate, because I'm a white Western Christian. So I probably will never be anything like them. So when people talk about integration in this country, how on earth do we do that? What does that look like?
You can't. And people say, oh, it adds to our diversity and so on. So certainly it does. And doubtless many immigrants have good qualities, and some come from countries with interesting and valuable cultures. Others come from cultures which are manifestly incompatible with ours. And we shouldn't be surprised if that causes problems. But it's only recently that one's been allowed to say that without having one's collar felt.
Well, you say that, I'm still not sure we are allowed to say it. Most nights I go to bed and I think, blimmin' heck, have I said a word too much this time round? Am I going to get cancelled? Am I going to get hauled into some office, or the fuzz going to come and knock on my door telling me I've committed a non-crime hate incident? How concerned are you? You know, you've lived through many eras of politics. You've watched the changing nature of this country under the guises of various governments. How worried are you for our country's future at this moment in time?
Very worried. We're reaching the point where it becomes very difficult. Well, it's been difficult to stop because of the weakness of the elites. It becomes more difficult to stop with the changing nature of the electorate. If there are a lot of people who've got a vested interest in bringing friends and relatives over, that makes it more difficult to change the laws. But I think it's still possible. And in fact, most people I meet of migrant origin, immigrant origin, think enough is enough. I spoke at a school recently, and I don't know that there were any white children in the class I spoke to, but I spoke on the economics of mass migration. And the teacher said, why do they all agree with you? I said, because what I said was rational. It's doing us no good. She said, but oh, their relatives or their parents or they themselves came from abroad. I said, but what I said was rational. They can see that. So even people who you might think would be resistant to this message if it's rationally and intelligently put, will, I think, say enough is enough, we've got to stop it. People came to this country because of what it is, not in order to change it. And they don't want to see it changing unrecognisably.
No, I agree. I fear, though, your anecdote, Lord Lilly, about the response of the teacher to your comment suggests that we're going to have a bit of an uphill struggle when it comes to convincing those who might be able to vote in the general election next time round, who are currently 12 years old, from holding the right sorts of principles that this country desperately needs in our 11th hour. That was Lord Peter Lilly, giving us, I'm afraid, a bit of a grim outlook for the country. And I wonder, I do, where we go from here. I mean, it's palpable now, isn't it? I've said on this show previously, there have been warnings that we're going to really hit the skids when it comes to peace and tranquility in this nation. Have we now damaged the nature of our setup in this country irrevocably? If so, what? What happens next? I don't know. I've been talking about it for a while and people might have thought I was doom-mongering and thought life was great and it's all going to be fine. And believe you me, I've been out in the wilds of the New Forest for a few days looking at all the baby ponies and stuff felt absolutely fine down there. Then you come back to work and you see what's going on Epic and you think, soon coming to a town near you. If it's not happening in your neighbourhood at this rate, it will be, won't it? So what do you make of that? 0344499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to be speaking to some of you after this break. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. And if you'd like to send me a WhatsApp message, it is also 0344499 1000. I'm going to be reading those as well after this.
We do need to remind Deborah Turness, who's the head of BBC News, that actually the Hamas government is also a prescribed terrorist organisation in this country, in America and many of our allies. Does this surprise you that the head of BBC News doesn't know that Hamas as an entity is one big terrorist organisation?
It shocks me because it's very clear, but that explains why they haven't called them a terrorist organisation. And of course, you're using her logic. Hitler was only the head of the political wing of the Nazi Party.
And there you are.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. Let's do some messages now. I have a feeling this message might be was probably destined for Mike because we haven't spoken about this yet, but I'm going to read it out anyway because I totally agree with this. This is Debbie, no doubt talking, I assume, about John Turode, who it's emerged got fired by the BBC for using the N-word how many years ago privately in a bar. And you kind of think, well, first of all, as much as you're not allowed to use the N-word, it was a blimmin' private conversation in a bar. And it's a word, it's a combination of letters. I mean, if you didn't mean offence by it, then just move on already, okay? That's the commonsensical thing to do. It's not like he's burning crosses in people's front gardens. But no, it's actually worse than that, because he was singing along to a rap song. That's what he was doing. He was singing along to a blimmin' rap song. You're not allowed to sing along to a song where they use the word and use the same word as them, and no, so you get sacked from your job? Debbie said, how do you get the sack for singing a song? What an absolute farce. If it's such a bad word, then why is it in the lyrics? Two-tier, huh? Two-tier. It's been around a lot longer than we recognise, hasn't it? We all need to protest, says Adrian, but not damage police or other properties. We're better than that. I agree. And very often, you know, this is what I think, Adrian, that there are people who get whipped up into a frenzy and love the opportunity to lob things at police cars just because it's something to do. And they really do not help the cause. If they think they're helping the cause, they are not. They make it difficult for everybody, including me, when I have to sit here for 3 hours and monitor what I say so I don't go the same way as Jonta Road. They make it hard for all of us. But I'd say this, it seems to me every time the British people want to have a say and make their thoughts known, some unwashed, short-fringed, blue-haired, placard-waving Antifa mob turn up to stir up the discontent. They're there to poke and prod and goad and try and make things reach boiling points. Well, at the beginning of these protests, it seems to me somebody was nicked by the cops and they were nicked from that side. But it turns out, actually, that things are just bubbling over and they're going on. And I just wonder when they're going to reach tipping point. So I do urge the good, sensible patriots of Epping Forest who want to protect their women and their girls and have every right to protest about what is being done in their communities. Keep your cool, all right? Protest, make your voice known, but, you know, do think about the words used. I'm not saying in a censor yourself way, but I'm just saying as an adult, as a grown-up. Let's make our voices heard and let's make our voices listened to. We take it too far and we risk actually the opposite happening. Not that they're listening anyway, but, you know, there's my sort of two-bit. Hello, Alex. I left the UK years ago and cried when I did so. Now I only cry when I watch what my homeland has become, with Starmer at the helm, and I fear for my grandchildren. Well, just with Starmer at the helm, was it? No. It was with Boris and all them lot as well. They've all been in this. They've all been doing this. It's not like Starmer just suddenly said, oh, let's everybody under the sun who's from, you know, some Middle Eastern war hole come here. No, it was Angela Merkel, it was the EU, it was David Cameron, George Osborne, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, then Sir Keir Starmer. He's just the icing on the blimmin' cake of disaster. And Andrew, who said, regarding votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, this represents a fundamental change to our democracy. What's to stop a government removing votes for OAPs or even suspending all votes? There must be a mechanism in place to stop these tin pot dictators. Well, the mechanism should be democracy, but we're not being given much of that, are we? And mark my words. Oh, yeah, you've smelt a rat. You know the reason they're changing our plebiscite and giving the franchise to people of the age of 16 in the next general election is because they've done the mathematics. They've got the focus groups and the modelers onto it and going, wow, we think most of these people, once they've been brainwashed by their teachers who are all members of leftist teachers' unions, they're all going to think that bidding net zero, which is what Reform are going to campaign on, will be a disaster and the world will explode. They'll also think that men can wear frocks and be called women. They'll also think that all refugees who come over on boats should be beatified and given everything they want because they're poor individuals that we have a duty to look after. So the Labour Party will have done their maths on this and are doing it so they can essentially stitch up the next election. But if they think, for whatever reason, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, the GOAT of TikTok, Mr. Nigel Farage, might actually do well out of that high school vote. Because, look, believe you me, places like the Netherlands, where they've done polling on this, the kids are alt-right. Huh? The kids like the populism, all right? They don't like the ridiculous woke policies of their forebears. No, they want to change things up. And so if the Labour Party suddenly think, doing the break class vote 16 the mechanism to try and make sure they stay in power forever on a day isn't going to be enough, oh, don't you worry. They'll change the format again. They'll opt for PR, or as they're doing in the mayoral system, the preferential candidate votes. We're going to be speaking to Dame Andrea Jenkins, Reform's UK Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, about that after the next break. But they will do anything. They'll reach for any lever to probably try and create one of these sort of left coalitions to keep Reform out. That's what they did in France, the snap election, the super coalition. So Front National, Rassemblement, whatever they're called these days, couldn't get into power. they will be looking and learning and plotting and scheming and working out the way to make sure that you, dear listener, will never get the politicians that you want. Let's speak now to some of our callers, shall we? And start off with one of my favourites. She's a regular. It's Georgina in London. Good morning, Georgina.
Well, I wish it was a good morning, but after watching what's going on in Epping, Alex, I'm absolutely horrified. I don't agree with protest, but this, I think, is justified to a degree because we are being inundated with illegal migrants who are being put into the middle of these little towns, and it's given a green card to these people where our children and our women are concerned. And I, for one, I don't know how you feel, but I am...
Oh, no, you don't know how I feel, Georgina. I thought you listened to this show all the time.
I do, all the time, my darling, but I've got to tell you, it's boiling my urine to actually sit and watch this. We as a nation have been trying to tell the government for the last 30 years that there was starting to be a problem, and no one has listened. We have been gagged, we have been vilified, we have been ostracised from our own society, and this is just getting beyond the pale. I have had enough. My children are not going to be victimised in their own country. They're not going to be terrorised in their own country. They are not going to be followed home from the shops, and I am not going to live anymore worrying what's happening to my children when they are outside of my eyesight.
I'm with you. Look, Georgina, everything you say, I echo that sentiment entirely. It does feel like we're being victimised in our own country, particularly as a woman in this country. But you say you're not going to live like this anymore. What are you going to do?
What am I going to do? I'm going to make a stand. I am going to make this government listen. They are trying to gag us. They are not letting us have our say. If we try and speak, they are calling us far-right. They are calling us racist. No, Keir Starmer, this is common sense. And if your children were living in the areas where these migrants were, I am more than sure you would be out there with your banner saying enough is enough and we will stand for this no more.
Well, there you go. You've heard it from Georgina. I'm sure a lot of people listening to their radios right now are cheering her on. Let's speak now to Colin, who's in Rugby. Good morning to you, Colin.
Well, good morning, Alex. With Georgina's point, I mean, one of the things that really does need to be done is to put all these illegals in some kind of migrant camp securely, because that's the only thing that can be done. And Anne Widdecombe once said that one of the best things to do is to put a barbed wire fence around a holiday camp, and you've got a low-grade prison. But much more, another point I'd like to make, one of the things that absolutely needs to be done, because the Home Office have lost control of who's here, is to make sure that everybody is registered and no access whatsoever to any benefits or healthcare or anything else unless they're registered on a national database.
Look, I agree with everything that you say. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem our governments are going to do that anytime soon. That's my big worry. Colin in Rugby, thank you ever so much. And it's interesting, Colin, they're talking about essentially putting people in makeshift accommodation. When you look at the big camps in places like Lune Plage in northern France, near Calais, people are living in bivouacs and tents made out of bin bags. They're rough sleeping in the sand dunes. They're not in four-star hotels with driving lessons and playstations and yoga classes and pocket money and a wardrobe allowance. No, they're not given anything. Nada. Not even a health check. Maybe a bowl of gruel by those do-gooders at Care for Cali, but that's it. And you kind of think, so why is it over here they get all the good stuff? Because if I was offered an all-inclusive full-board stay in Lanzarote for a couple of years, where I could also have some nice little trinkets, pull pints in the black market where everyone turned a blind eye, I'd quit this job tomorrow, pay £5 grand and go do that. Because it's a better life. even for me. And so you can't blame these people piling into dinghies because we are the El Dorado for illegals. Someone who I'm pretty sure is going to agree with that, who has echoed such sentiments, indeed was constantly held to account by the lazy legacy media saying, so you would put them in tents? Yes, she would. It's Dame Andrea Jenkins. Don't go anywhere because she's joining us next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello and welcome back to the show. There's one big story on everyone's lips, certainly in this news channel today. Talk Towers is buzzing with what is going on in Epping Forest. Now, they're not talking about the BBC, of course they're not. They're still wanting to prostate themselves at the altar of mass immigration over on those parts. But here, we are aware how angry all of you are at the injustice, at the lunacy, at the devastation to our demography that is being wrought upon this country, not just by this government, but by previous governments. A woman who has been very forthright about what she thinks about the treatment of migrants is Dame Andrea Jenkins, Reform UK's Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, and she joins us now. Good morning, Andrea. Wonderful to have you on the show.
Good morning, Alex.
What do you make of what is going on down in Essex? These protests outside the migrant hotel.
Look, you can understand people being angry, can't you? I mean, I've been fighting it. I was fighting in Parliament for years, you know, against the Conservative government. And I remember holding a debate, actually, Alex, where the true cost of illegal migration, only 5 MPs turned up. So I think the trouble is most Westminster politicians are out of touch, obviously, except Reform. But you can understand the fury. I mean, I look at Skegness. We've got migrant hotels up in Lincolnshire, and as I've said previously, let's build these hotels next to some of these government ministers' homes.
But you say you've got migrant hotels in Lincolnshire, and one of the central pillars of Reform's pledge in things like such as the mayoral elections and the local elections was to try and shut those hotels down. Are you anywhere close to being able to do that?
It's obviously the legal stuff. Richard, Tice and I are working on something. And I know Reform are as well, looking at the legal implications. So, yeah, it's not forgotten about. We are, you know, doing stuff in the background.
But this is the difficulty. I mean, the only recourse that anybody seems to have under this government, where you can't make the laws yourself, is to have to sort of work within their limits. And it's things such as the ECHR, the Human Rights Act, all of these judges, whether it's the High Court or the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, who seem to always take the decision against Britain and in favour of migrants. We now learn that there's this company called Bearings, I think up in Manchester, who you go on their website, big flashing adverts. Do you want to sue the UK government if you're an Afghan for a data breach? And you just have your head in your hands thinking nothing seemingly can be done, at least for 4 years. So what on earth are the British people going to do? Are you worried that what's going on in Epping could actually set a contagion around the UK? And despite the huge crackdowns after Southport, which I thought were ruthless and very much unwarranted in many situations, that they're not going to be enough, that the cork is going to fly at the top of the bottle. And what we're seeing is with some of of the street demonstrations in Spain could start taking place here?
Look, I can give a prime example of the Labour's View Fest. I've got a friend who works in a hotel in Yorkshire, which the migrants are housed, and they had to call carpet cleaners in because a fight had broke out. There was blood everywhere between the migrants themselves. And Hilary Benn apparently trotted up to the hotel, gave him his card. This is what my friend who works in the hotel said, and said, "Oh, we're here to help." And I think that sums up the view of the Labour government. This is what my friend told me happened. But look, of course people are protesting in the street. We are always back of the queue, aren't we, Alex? You know, this is soft touch Britain. This is why I said the tent comment. We've got to stop the pull to Britain. I did this petition 2 years ago to come out with the ECHR. I got over 50,000 signatures. I think we'd get even much more now. But we've got to put a stop to it, because it's like politicians in Westminster and the Labour government do not care about the British people. It's hug a migrant, not actually support the British people.
What is it that they don't understand when they look at these countries such as Afghanistan, where we're now getting, Lord knows, potentially 100,000 people, according to the Telegraph, only 1 in 16 may actually be credible in terms of having links to the UK Armed Forces and therefore maybe having some sort of right of appeal to be here. What is it that they don't get when they look at that country and they see women are forced to wear burqas, that they're not allowed to go to the marketplace without an escort, that they're stoned to death for having been raped? When they look at the attitudes towards whether it's in countries like Iraq, 9-year-old girls can be married and FGM can be committed. What is it they don't understand? That these men are a threat to women and women's integrity and women's safety in this country. Why is it us, the female of the species, who's being thrown under the bus by politicians?
I agree. And look, I don't know about you, Alex, but you know, when I come to London especially, I don't like using the tube anymore. I don't feel safe. And if I've got to get a late night train back from London, you know, back up north, I feel uncomfortable. And we've got it with the Labour Party. Look, we've got the Labour Party who, as we know historically, doesn't know what a woman is, so they're impeding women's rights with the whole transgender debate. And then allowing these migrants to come in, it's putting young people at threat. And I feel fear for that next generation, especially young women. And I think the only thing we can do is, as politicians, as the public, I mean, you had some great callers earlier, is keep fighting back, because in the end, I think we'll start seeing more pressure on the MPs, and they will start putting pressure on the government, and then let's hopefully make the government fall. Because what you find, Alex, that I was a government whip for a while, when you've got a super majority like we did in 2019, for the first 18 months, people are usually well behaved, but when they start getting letters from their constituents where they realise that they could lose their seat, then it starts to crumble. So I think put pressure on the local MPs by sending letters in, emails of how you're angry, then they will break in the end, and then hopefully we can bring down this goddamn awful Labour government, because they don't deserve to govern. And I really do fear where we'll be in 4 years' time otherwise.
I fear where we're going to be in 4 years' time, but I also fear they're going to rig it. They're going to stitch it up, aren't they? I mean, in response to people like you becoming mayor, they've decided they're going to move to a preferential candidate system. The local elections, half of them were cancelled because they're going to move the deck chairs around when it comes to certain authorities. All of a sudden, there's votes for 16.
Conservative as well. In my area, the Conservatives wrote to the government and said they wanted to cancel the elections because they knew they wasn't going to win. It's both parties.
So do you think what's going to happen here is essentially what happened in France, who had a snap election at the same time as us, which is the Labour Party, if the votes for 16 Leaver doesn't bring them in enough support, they're going to maybe go for some sort of PR or alternative vote, or look at numerically what's going to suit them the best and then form some sort of super coalition with the other lefties to keep reform out.
Yeah, I think they will. But I think the saving grace, though, is that look, they've got this new party now, which is going to split the left even more. And don't forget that most of the cabinet voted for Corbyn. And look, Angela Rayner supported Corbyn. And so the left vote is going to be really split. I think that, people are sick of both the Labour and the Conservatives, and I do think we could win. I really do think Reform can win the next general election.
Is there not a risk, actually, because the split in the Labour Party is to the left, that as much as we want Sir Keir Starmer to actually wake up, smell the coffee and listen to what the British people want, because it's clearly demonstrable, in fact, it has been for a long time, I don't buy in that it's going to be a sudden revelation for politicians that the British people don't want mass immigration from the Middle East and North Africa. I think that was patently obvious. Before it even became a thing, it should have been patently obvious to anybody with a brain cell rattling around in their skull. But is not the worry here going to be that actually Starmer might feel he's got to cover that off and be dragged further to the left?
I think there's a possibility, but as I said, because of the strength of feeling with the public, they're going to be putting pressure on MPs, so he will be torn. He'll be between a rock and a hard place, and he deserves it.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I'm a bit worried about that Lord Hermer mate of his, who seems to be the one who pulls the strings above the strange little puppet that is old Lego head Sir Keir Starmer. And you talk about the public needs to start fighting back. I mean, clearly the people of Epping Forest are doing this. We're sympathetic as to their reasons to want to go out and protest. But where people are not just denied a voice at the ballot box, and have been for years now, I mean, they can write letters to MPs. Is it going to be enough? How can people fight back?
I think it's a mixture, really. Every time there's an election, a by-election, don't vote for the two other parties. I think this is about sending a message, and they'll start getting worried then, the politicians, Labour, if you stop voting for them. But don't be apathetic, because if you don't go out and vote, they think it's fine. You've got to go out and vote, go out and protest, sign as many petitions as you can, write to your MPs, and be vocal on social media. Mind you, Starmer might lock you up. So.
Oh, Andrea, thank you for always being a joy, being a delight, always having a smile on your face and actually having a bit of backbone and standing up for not just Britain but the women of this country as well. That was Dame Andrea Jenkins, Reform UK's Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, fighting the good fight. She said, why on earth don't we just put these people in tents? And I remember those interviews, Sky going, what do you mean put them in tents? She's like, sure. And? Oh, but you can't be serious. What, they just have to sleep under canvas? So, oh, did you go to Glastonbury Festival this weekend? You seemed to live through it, didn't you? So I kind of agree with her on that. I wholeheartedly agree with her on that. Let's see how much self-flagellation the Conservative Party are feeling, though, because they were part of this, weren't they? They helped author the disaster we seem to be currently facing. We're going to be speaking to Andrew Rosendale, MP Conservative and Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister after this.
slowly there was going to be greater alignment on certain things, not necessarily to our significant benefit, purely because of the financial cost. I mean, any amount of money that we're spending in order for British citizens to be able to use e-gates is not an amount of money worth spending. It is this strange Remainer middle class fantasy where they go, oh, I have to add 20 minutes onto my entire trip because I have to queue at at passport control, whereas everybody else gets to use the electronic gates. And for that, we're supposed to give them how much money?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back to the show. I'm joined by Andrew Rosendale, MP, Conservative and Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister. Let's start off, first of all, by talking about what on earth is going on with this data leak and the Afghans. Report in the Telegraph today says 1 in 16 only might be credible as people who deserve to come over here. What's led to this screaming mess?
I'm shocked by it all. I don't understand it. I do understand that those who worked with the British Armed Forces in Afghanistan who were under threat of their lives were under threat with the Taliban, I can understand why we had a duty to them. I don't understand why it had to be secret for so long, and I don't really understand why so many people are on this list and how many of them are actually genuine. There's been a cover-up and both governments have been part of this, and I think that the British people are owed an explanation for what has happened.
I mean, look, we don't know anything about this this leak particularly. We heard that someone accidentally just sent an email, and why are all these people on this list, and why does this now mean every single one of them seems to be able to use Barings law firm to come here with their 12,000 children? But is there a risk potentially, because it was being stuck around on Facebook groups, that this was done maliciously in order to lead to a situation where we're then forced to accept so many people, Lord knows who amongst their number?
Look, I don't know. It could be the truth, it could be something different, it could be just a mistake, we don't know. All I can say is that this is one of the worst mistakes of any government has made, but it's not really politicians. It happened through people that had access to this data and it was leaked. So at the end of the day, governments, of course, they're to blame for things that go wrong, but it's not a party political thing. It's a huge mistake, and the powers that be obviously have to account for what they've done. The trouble is, it's the British people paying the bill, and we're having to take in all these additional people from Afghanistan, and now we find out it's happening behind closed doors and we weren't aware of it. And I think that's what people are angry about, that we didn't know the truth, and only now we're finding out.
It is in the gift of the government, though, isn't it, about actually doing something about what could end up being a massive problem. If there's 100,000 people who come over from Afghanistan to be resettled here, plus, because apparently lawyers are now, of course, seeking to use the ECHR to force us into accepting even more people, because they'll want to bring every single person within their village, within their tribe. Again, we don't know who they are. I don't imagine 100,000 people can be sensibly vetted, particularly coming from a country like Afghanistan. That actually the government could turn around and say, we're going to declare some sort of state of emergency. We're not going to use the ECHR. We're going to ignore it. But they're not going to. How at risk do you think we are? I mean, seriously, how scary is this?
Well,
Should we just calm down? Or?
Well, no, I think it is scary, generally speaking, not just people from Afghanistan, but the fact that we have so many people coming into our country, and many of them are not here for the right reasons, and they are using the generosity of this country to stay here, to bring their families. We simply can't afford it, but also we're bringing in people that are risky, people that could do our country harm. So we need a radical change to our asylum policy and our immigration policy, and we need a government prepared to do the thing that is necessary to protect our country. The Conservatives failed to do this in government, and that's why we're out of government, but Labour are far worse. So the Conservative Party, my party, has to really take this seriously and take a radical plan forward if we are to ever win back the confidence of the British people. But as you've rightly said, Alex, the lawyers are already chasing this. I mean, potentially, this is going to cost us huge sums of money because the lawyers will now take it to the very end and try to squeeze as much money out of the system as they can. And that's ECHR is another thing. We simply have to get out of the ECHR. There's no doubt about that. And I think the Conservative Party needs to make that decision very quickly.
I'm worried about how much it's going to cost the taxpayer. Everybody's worried about the cost to the taxpayer when we're in such a big financial crisis. But what worries me more on a personal level, take whatever money you want out of my salary. I just don't want to be harassed in the street. I don't want 14-year-old girls to be raped. I don't want men standing outside school gates going after school children because that's fair game in their own country and they think it's fair game over here because girls over here get to go to school, don't have to wear the burqa, can have a little drink on a park bench together. And they think, therefore, that those girls are scum of the earth and they can do what they like with them. And what worries me is stories like this, where it says that hundreds of asylum seekers living in these hotels have been charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and GBH. In fact, court records show, and courts, of course, are recording only where there are charges. Normally, that's the tip of an iceberg because there'll be things that never get charged. I know of a particular story where a policeman told me he had to go intervene in a big beat-up, a big brawl inside a migrant hotel, and it was decided, well, probably best not to charge anyone because then there'll be reprisals. Then you wonder how many women don't go forward to the police. When it's things such as street harassment, you probably don't phone the police, but it makes your life a screaming misery. And what we know from court records alone is 1 in 100 migrants, 1 in 100 are committing crimes. They have been charged. This is a danger now, and what I want to know is what we do. Yes, we've got a load more coming. Brilliant. We've got at least 100 coming over every single day. What do we do about the people who are already here?
Well, all of it's a disgrace, and the political establishment in this country has completely failed to deal with it, completely. And people are angry. People have had enough. My constituents have absolutely had enough, and we're seeing it affecting our towns and cities across the country. So we need a radical change to our approach to this. We can't do anything until we've
What does that look like? I mean, radical change is good, but I want to hear what that is.
So, first of all, we take back control of our human rights laws. We cannot be subjected to ECHR rulings for one moment longer. We need to leave the ECHR so at least we can decide ourselves what our own policy is. Then we ensure that those who are here illegally at the moment are deported. We need to mass deport anyone that is here
And what if
illegally.
they've thrown away their passports and you don't know where they've come from? Or what if there's no returns agreement because the people in the country you want to send them back to is the Taliban?
You're quite right, and that's why it can be complicated, but we have to set the principles. If we set the principles and we set out to achieve them, even though there are obstacles on the way, then at least we've got a clear path. And thirdly, we change our entire immigration system so that people that come into this country are only people we absolutely need, or there's particular family circumstances.
Would you go as far as doing something similar to what Trump's doing in America, which is sort of coming out of a naughty list of countries? We won't accept people from these countries because of your human rights record, because of your attitudes
potentially. But we should also be prepared to strip people of their nationality. So if someone has come to this country, we've trusted them, we've given them British citizenship, they supposedly swore oath of allegiance to the King, and then we find that they're doing bad things or they're disrespecting our culture, our laws and our British way of life, then we should strip them of their British citizenship and send them to where they originally came from.
I want to ask you, because you just told me during the advert break when you came into the studio that you've got a really cool idea for taking back control of Essex, and I thought, hey, Andrew, that sounds like a really good plan. The borough of Havering, tell me more.
So Havering is Essex. We've never been London, but in the 60s we were lumped into Greater London, and ever since then we've paid a lot of money into Greater London, particularly now that Mayor Khan is running the Greater London Authority. It's costing us a fortune, but we've never really been London. We orbit London, we're close to London, but we're not in London, and we don't like having to fund all what's going on in inner London. So we want to reclaim our Essex identity, and I'm campaigning for Havering to be an independent borough. We don't need the mayor. We don't need the GLA. We can work with our neighbouring boroughs. We can work with London or Essex. But we don't need this overarching mayor and this overarching GLA that costs us hundreds of millions of pounds for which we get very little in return. Do you know, in my borough, we barely see a policeman. We barely see one. We should get 1,000 police based on what we pay. We barely see any police. Transport for London, well, they threaten us constantly that if we leave the GLA, our pensioners will lose their Freedom Pass. That's not true, because we pay for that additionally for the Freedom Pass, and I'm putting a bill to Parliament on Monday to make it law that they can't take away our Freedom Pass for the pensioners. In fact, it needs to be extended to the entire TfL network. So if you live in Brentwood, or if you live in Watford, or if you live in Cheshunt, which is served by TfL services, then you should be entitled to the same travel concessions.
I love this idea of devolving away from Carnistan. Take back control of your outer London borough. You don't need to be under Sadiq's shadow. I think it's a great plan, and all strength to your elbow, Andrew Rosendale MP, Conservative and Shadow Foreign Affairs Minister. Thank you for coming into the studio. Thank you for listening for the first hour. There's still 2 more to come, so do stay tuned. We've got a lot more to discuss. We're going to be back on the subject of the protests in Epping just after this. Keep your thoughts coming in. I'll see you on the other side.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, my lovelies, my patriots, my discerning listeners. Thank you for keeping me company for the first hour. Welcome aboard if you've only just joined us. And if you've missed the spicy little ensemble that we put together between 10 and 11, because you're only just hopping on board HMS Let's Sort everything out, don't worry, because you can go onto YouTube or onto the Talk app and watch it all back from the beginning. In fact, you can watch it at your leisure at any point. Whether you're soaking in the tub tonight, I'll be there for you. I'll join you. Don't you worry. If you're sitting on the throne, instead of reading that book that you kept meaning to finish, listen to me instead if you're in the doctor's waiting room with a 2-hour stretch ahead of you. Or you can fill those hours listening to me at whatever time of day by watching back on YouTube or on the Talk app. We've had a stonking first hour, so shall we keep it up? But before we continue with business as usual, I want to tell you about a very important, momentous interview that I'm certainly going to be tuning into myself, because the one and only Talk presenter, the broadcasting titan, James Well, an extremely dear friend of mine, arguably the man who made me, one could say, has given what he says is his final interview amid his terminal cancer battle. In his most compelling interview to date, an emotional James sat down with Reform UK leader and longtime friend Nigel Farage, I suppose the other man who made me, at his home in Kent. He looked back on his legendary broadcasting career, as well as looking at the world of politics. Should we have a look at a clip?
A lot of people think that you will win the next election. I hope that. But there is the chance, slight chance, that you will lose the next election. What happens then?
Well, look, winning the election, I mean, if I'm the bookies' favourite to be Prime Minister, which I am, doesn't say much for the rest of them, does it, really?
By quite a lot, aren't you? How many now?
No, I mean, we've actually led the last 55 opinion polls in a row.
Yeah.
And they're in a blind state of panic. And Starmer can't cope with it. And he sits in Parliament. He stares at me. He doesn't know what to do. If I walk past him and go, "Morning, Prime Minister," they don't know what to do. And the Tory party, their leader, what's the name of their leader? Oh, Matt Kemmy, yeah. I mean, but you've got to laugh. James, we have a chance of doing something really historic, really genuinely historic. And there's a momentum out there. There's some optimism out there. They're going to throw everything they got at us, but I think we're going to do it. And I'm certainly not even contemplating failure.
You don't want to miss that. I'll tell you for why. I remember once Nigel and I going in my little car, back when a little MX-5 actually, even put the roof down and ruffled his hair with some wind. We went down to visit James in Essex once, Kent once together, because Nigel himself is a Kent man. We stopped off at a pub near James called the Whodunit. Great pub indeed. And this was when James was definitely more robust, and we enjoyed many drinks into the summer evening, and it was fantastic being accompanied by both of them. They are two of my favourite men. You're never going to get more straight talking than that. Two titans in their own right, one of broadcasting, one of politics. In fact, actually, here's a little secret. Nigel once tried to persuade Mr. James Well to be a candidate for UKIP, I think it was, back in the day. I think it was even London Mayor or something like that. Extraordinary. Imagine if that had happened. Wouldn't London be a better place if he had said yes? Anyway, that amazing interview is out this evening from 10 p.m. here on Talk. You can watch it live at 10 p.m. Or catch up with it indeed later on YouTube or indeed on the Talk app. Like I said, that is going to be the best interview that's been done this year, if ever. I adore both of those men. I owe so much to both of those men, as do many of us listening, no doubt. Both see... both have a sort of duty, really, to, give those men the plaudits that they deserve. One, for everything he's done in broadcasting, keeping so many people company, giving them logic and humour and a sense of belonging. And the other for, sacrificing so much to try and save this poor forsaken island. On the subject of trying to save this poor forsaken island, perhaps that is what the people of Epping Forest are trying to do by all getting together outside the Bell Hotel and saying enough is enough after there have been accusations of one particular resident of that hotel 8 days after entering the country up in front of the courts for attempting allegedly to kiss a 14-year-old girl, something that he has denied. And the local men have said, we're not going to put up with this anymore. They shouldn't be here. This hotel's too close to the school. We're not being listened to. We've got no recourse to our politicians, so we're going to turn up and we are going to protest. And of course, the far left turned up and things are starting to get a little hot under the collar. Meanwhile, we learn about what's going on with this debacle, for want of a better phrase. There's far stronger words that I feel like I'd like to use to describe this ridiculous situation where we may now see up to 100,000 Afghans coming to live in the UK, many of whom are unvetted. The Telegraph seem to think only 1 in 16 may actually have a technical right to apply for refuge in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, our friends, the immigration lawyers, are there seeking to use the ECHR to force us to accept thousands more. The situation's only going to get worse. And we learn that hundreds of asylum seekers living in these hotels at our expense. You're paying for it. I'm paying for it. Our little girls' safety, they're paying for it as well in their own way. We've learned. This is court records. Court records. So these aren't allegations. This is the stuff that's made it to court, which is the tip of the iceberg. That 1 in 100 of these people in these hotels, 1 in 100, have been hauled before magistrates. We're getting more than 1 in 100 coming over in the blimmin' boats. And they're not being hauled before magistrates because they threw their documents into the wash. No, they're being hauled before magistrates because they're committing crimes such as rape, robbery and GBH. I just don't know how we go on from here. Let's speak to Guy Dampier, who is Senior Researcher on Nationhood at the Prosperity Institute. Guy, thank you so much for coming onto the programme.
Good morning, thank you for having me.
Yes, great to have you. Senior Researcher on nationhood. I want to dig into that because what is nationhood these days when you've got anybody from any country turning up and saying, I want to live in Britain. Apparently we treat them better than we treat our own. They don't seem to want to integrate. They don't assimilate. This idea that magically, if you've been brought up in the Middle East or North Africa, you can land in Dover and suddenly go, oh, I've seen the light. I'm a Christian. I'm a Westerner now. To me is for the birds. So how do we maintain a sense of nationhood when we've got this massive influx of people from other cultures?
I think you have to say that we can't have a massive influx like this. I mean, even if you assume that all these people have, with the best will in the world, want to become British, the numbers are so high that in a lot of places, it's foreigners living next to foreigners living next to foreigners. Who are they going to learn to be British from?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I get this, but when politicians are all saying the same thing, well, not all politicians, but a lot of people are saying, look, we've got a problem. We can't have the numbers anymore. It's not sustainable. Those who are here have to integrate. And I'm like, OK, this is fine. We know we can't have the numbers anymore. Labour Party ain't going to do bip about that, are they? But we've already got a load of people here living in hotels, being put into private accommodation, who are treating our girls like rubbish, who are committing crimes, who don't speak the language, who don't like us, who don't respect our culture, cannot suddenly have some sort of magic Men in Black pen put in front of their eyes so they forget where they've come from and suddenly morph into British citizens with all of our sort of 2,000 years worth of Judeo-Christian heritage. It ain't going to happen. It's for the birds. So what I want to know is we've already got the problem. It's here. We're the 11th hour. There are people with placards outside a hotel in Epping. We've got to do something about the situation now, not just prevent it getting worse, but now. And I want to know what that is. What can we do?
Well, it's a tricky one. If the government wants to, the reason why we have this asylum system in crisis is because of their commitment to human rights law. Human rights law that is putting the human rights of asylum seekers, who in many cases are fakes and frauds, above the rights of British people. And that's what's leading to these horrible scenes that we're seeing. So the asylum system has to be reformed, and that's going to mean leaving the ECHR. It's going to mean repealing the Human Rights Act in the UK. It's going to mean stripping out an awful lot of the human rights law that people like Sir Keir Starmer and many of his lawyer friends have been putting into our law for 30 years at this point. It's going to be a huge project, but we need to do it.
OK, again, I'm going to go back to work because the question I'm really trying to get answered, because I don't have the answer. I'm not saying you have to, because I'm not sure anybody's got the blimmin' answer. We can get rid of the ECHR. We can uproot and unearth all of that human rights legislation, chuck it into the dustbin of history. We can turn off the tap and say enough is enough, no more in. And those who actually commit crimes and get charged must be deported somehow. We're going to have returns agreements with some pretty shady entities, but there you have it. What I want to know is, even if all of that happens, Kassam from Kabul doesn't suddenly think a 14-year-old girl with a short skirt who thinks she's a Kardashian because that's what she's been bombarded with on Instagram is actually someone who deserves our respect and shouldn't be harassed at the school gate. It doesn't change that. How do we deal with that element of all of this? Because I want to know that as a woman. I want to know that on behalf of all the women listening to this, of all the fathers, with daughters, the brothers, with sisters. How do we make sure these men who have come from countries who have completely different views of women and the freedoms of women, how we make sure that they don't go about harassing our girls?
It's a great question, and I'm a father of daughters. It's something that concerns me as well. I think the answer is you don't let them in the first place. If you've got them in the country already, if they're an asylum seeker, we should be going through these asylum records, including the ones who've been given asylum over the last few years, and we should be saying, is your case really genuine? And the ones that aren't, we should be kicking them out. And then for the ones that are still here, and who have a right to be here, for whom it's more difficult, We very simply have to have the police act so that when they do something bad, they are going to jail and they will get the lesson that it's not acceptable.
But then there's a fine line, isn't there? You know, if you know, with these sort of cases, as a woman myself who feels so deeply uncomfortable, I'm 41 years old, I've got a thick skin, I've actually lived in the developing world a lot. So, you know, I'm used to having to sort of adapt my own behaviours for the context in which I'm living. I wouldn't expect to have to do that in West London, but I seem to have to these days. And I can tell you this, I actually have to think about what I'm wearing. If I walk from the tube home with all my telly makeup on, I know I'm going to get the leers and the hisses and the stares and the trailers and all the men who make me feel really quite uncomfortable in the 3-minute walk between that tube station and my door. I'm looking in shop windows as I pass them to see if there's a shadowy figure behind me, that I'm aware of footsteps, and I'm turning my head around to see if someone's come down the street. It makes me feel extremely uncomfortable in my own skin, and so I'm getting out. That's the sort of stuff I want to see stop. But the problem is that isn't necessarily a crime. To follow someone like this with your eyes down the street or walk behind them or go tss, 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 tss. You know, there's not a police force in the world. If you said this man gave me a funny look and he's got a funny little Afghan hat on, you're probably going to be accused of being a racist. But that's the stuff we need to tackle.
Well, I'm sorry to hear it happens. I agree. We have these lower level cultural issues that don't necessarily reach the level of being a crime, but are nonetheless deeply unpleasant and deeply horrible. I think the way you deal with that is that the people who are doing this are, shall we say, not people who are going to be bankers and engineers and everything else. They shouldn't be let in the country in the first place. The ones that are here, quite often, won't necessarily be British citizens, and they should be sent home if they are no longer conducive to the public good. Some of them will have indefinite leave to remain or a similar status. But if we find that they are engaging in this kind of behaviour, then we should look at these cases again. We should say, you're not someone who's a good fit for this country. We're very sorry, but you should go home. And if you think that's culturally appropriate there, go and do that behaviour there.
You're sort of getting towards something that I've said recently, which is, you know, it's very difficult to suddenly go around, and I would hate to see this happen, some sort of, you know, disgusting Idi Amin policy. We go, all these people from this country, you now have to get out, we don't want you here anymore. It is non-discriminate, and it is a pretty vile way to go about running your business domestically. And so I think that one of the routes to sort of making sure that people who don't integrate decide they don't want to be here anymore is to say once and for all, we're putting a stop to all of these things which you regard as perks back at home but don't align with our cultural values. Would you agree, therefore, in order to maintain our sense of nationhood and the glue that binds us together, going as far as a government saying we're banning the burqa, we're not going to have hijabs at school, we're not going to provide translators, we're going to shut down faith schools and Islamic holiday camps? And while we're at it, guess what? You've got to stun your animals before slaughtering them. Are those the sort of things we should be looking into?
Well, I think there are individual cases to be made. So, for example, is halal slaughter cruel to the animal? Well, if it is, and we think that's a serious issue, then we should ban it, and we should ban it on that basis. I think the other issue you run into there is a lot of these people, as you say, with paid translators, they rely on the generosity of the state. They are basically able to live here because of the welfare state. If we change our rules so they're actually fair, so it requires people to work, and they actually have to live off the work that they do, I think we find that a lot of people who are a bad fit for this country would actually not have the finances to live here, and they would have to go somewhere else. You know, we can think about the fact that in London, nearly half of all people in London social housing were born overseas or headed up by someone who was born overseas. That's an insane number. We're subsidising people to live here, who in many cases aren't even working. So we should simply stop doing that.
And those symbols of multiculturalism that I mentioned before, things such as young girls being made to wear hijabs or women being forced to wear burqas, or perhaps they opt to wear them. I don't care either way. To me, it's a sign of oppression. And frankly, I think that we should be banning it as a result of making a deterrent to say to people, that sort of culture isn't our culture, so it's not welcome here. Should we be exploring that, or is actually wading into the realms of starting to dismantle the concept of multiculturalism a step too far?
Well, I think we should get rid of the concept of multiculturalism. It's not something that anybody particularly wants. It should be Britain's culture. On the other hand, I do think that liberty is important. I think if people want to wear a hijab, they should be allowed to. I think if they're wearing a full face covering, it's entirely within your rights to say, no, I'm not going to let you into my shop or my business or whatever else unless you take it off because I don't know who you are. And I think with schoolgirls especially, they should not be wearing a headscarf. Now, I mean, there's very little within Islam itself to say that they should be doing that. That is something that's being imposed here. Certainly children who are below puberty should not be wearing one, and that should just be banned in schools outright.
Good. I think we can sort of agree on that, actually, Guy. And let's get together and write a manifesto to save this nation. Senior researcher on nationhood at the Prosperity Interview, being very good to answer all of my pretty tough questions there. Same questions I think should start to be asked of MPs. Would you go as far as I would? I want to know whether you would go as far as I would. Let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to have a chit chat with me. You can also use that number to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I do like a voice note. Haven't played any yet. Do send them across. You can also just send good old letters the old-fashioned way on WhatsApp. 0344 499 1000. If you'd rather send me a text message, it is 87222. If you do that, you've got to write the word talk before you send your text. We're also on X, by the way. Our handle is at talkTV. We're going to take a short break now, but I'm back just after this. Good polling that's just come out shows that 2/3 of the country completely disagree with this. But the Labour Party don't care about that. They just want to make sure they stay in power. And what I hope, actually, is that when high school kids in countries like the Netherlands were asked who they would vote for, they all said Geert Wilders and the populist parties. So I hope our lot coming up have the, sense of mind to listen to their school teachers and think they're overpaid idiots and morons, and actually start unpicking some of the damage and the brainwashing they're subjected to.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and welcome back. Alex Phillips here with you until 1 o'clock. The big story today, of course, is the protest taking place outside the Bell Hotel in Epping Forest. The people have had enough. This is following allegations that a man who'd been in the country for all of 8 days, a resident of said hotel, had attempted to kiss a 14-year-old girl. Not just that, there were other claims made against this man. Meanwhile, hundreds of asylum seekers living at the cost of the taxpayer in these hotels have been charged with crimes such as rape, robbery and GBH. Court records show at least 1 in every 100 have been hauled before magistrates. 1 in every 100 of these people living at large with their buffets and their barber shops and their driving lessons and their PlayStations are raping, robbing and beating people up. Ain't that just great? And I've got this to say. You know what? The people of Epping Forest, they've had enough because the safety and the integrity of their daughters means something to them. They're not racists. They're not far right. Their fathers, uncles, grandfathers, brothers, mothers, aunts, uncles, sisters, friends. They're people who have been brought up in an England where women can do as they please. We might not always like it, but guess what? We're equal citizens to men. If we want to go and drink on a park bench, we can. If we want to wear a miniskirt, we can. If we want to get our lips pumped up and put false eyelashes on and strut about and take selfies on Instagram, we can. Because it's the 21st century, and that is what girls in this country do. Unfortunately, some of the men coming into this country, they think, therefore, those girls are fair game. And so this toxic combination, this clash of cultures, this cocktail of disaster has now led to a situation that I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle, because in 2016, the British people said, we don't want this. When Nigel Farage put that poster up in the centre of Westminster showing the big snaking queue of men coming from the Middle East heading towards Germany after Mutti Merkel said, refugees welcome, and he said, this is coming your way. Oh, he was called a racist, a xenophobe. He was shamed. Do you announce that poster? Would you stand by it today? Yes, I would, he said. And British people saw that and they thought, uh-oh, I don't want that to happen. The establishment said, it's fear-mongering, it's evil, you can't think like that. They tried to gaslight us. They lied to us. Because it did happen, didn't it? And again, we've gone to the ballot box and we have said the rate of people coming into this country legally and illegally is too much. The concessions given to people from minority cultures while we are demonised and victimised in our own country is now beyond the pale. They have tried to tell you, they've used every means possible time and again to tell you that this cannot happen. They are humans. They want to protect their young. They want to protect their society. They want to protect their heritage, their legacy, their culture. They want to stick together and build their communities and make sure their communities are safe and recognisable. This doesn't mean they don't want people from outside to join those communities. If those people want to integrate, the British people are the first to extend the hand of friendship and always have been. We are not a racist country. But what we are is human beings. We're human beings, biologically wired to want to look after our own tribe and actually make sure that it has prosperity and peace and safety and security, that our children can grow up to benefit from all of the work that their ancestors have put in to build this nation. That is how humans are wired to be as social animals. You cannot change that about humanity. And you know that, don't you? You know that, you, the judges in Strasbourg. You know that in your ivory towers over in the EU. You know that on those green benches. You know that this is part of the human condition. And so what do? Instead, you try to make sure that we forget that we reject it, that internally somehow we are brainwashed to not be those humans, that we're told if we even think the wrong way, we're a racist or a xenophobe. If we use certain language, we might lose our jobs. That actually we must beatify these people. We must be told how poor they are, how much of a disaster it is in their countries, how we somehow are responsible for the mess their own leaders have made in their own nations, people that no doubt they supported. Oh no, we're told not to pattern seek. When we see repeatedly in the newspaper rape on Bournemouth Beach, harassment of a girl outside the school gates, grooming gangs terrorising our cities, the same perpetrators, the same victims, we're told not to pattern seek. We're told don't join up the dots, don't make 2 and 2 equal 4. If you do that, you're a monster, you're wrong, you're a demon. And this has been rammed down our necks now, rammed down our throats for decades. We are gaslighting our young girls into not having internal senses for their own protection, to think this person could be a threat to me, this person might be a risk. We are throwing the safety of our daughters under the bus, and it has to stop. But you have given them no way, no democratic recourse to make them feel that they're being listened to, and you are still not doing it. You're still ignoring them. You're still thinking there's more time on the clock and the 11th hour hasn't been reached. But mark my words, look at what's gone on in Spain. Look at what's going on in Italy and France and Ireland and now in Epping Forest, and realise the time is now. You've got to act. I had to get that off my chest. Let's now speak to Elliot, who is in Bushy. Good morning to you, Elliot.
Hi, totally agree. You're absolutely right. Two very major things that everyone is afraid to say. I speak to people, they tell me, I share it with you. As far as this government and the individuals, the backbenchers, Starmer, the whole rotten mob, they loathe this country. They hate its values. They hate everything about it. You'll never put the genie back in the bottle, as you say, because it's gone too far. They don't have the will or the wish to do so. They wish to completely bring this country under some, I don't know, Islamic type, authoritarian, Sharia, EU type environment. They don't care about our basic tolerance, our communication, our Judeo-Christian cultures on which this country was formed. We fought 2 world wars. God knows what those survivors are thinking now. That's number one. I'm saying, and I say it again, they loathe and hate this country. You can't say that. I'm saying it. Secondly, Macron, this nonsense of him coming over, waste of time, waste of money. He hates his country too. This whole immigration thing from France is being done as a punishment to us by him and his rotten government, because it's a punishment to us and Britain for leaving the EU, undertaking Brexit. He loathes us. And again, in history, we saved that country. There's a lot we've done in history. There's a lot we've done for the world. We have always been harmonious and accepted people in. And now the people have had enough. The
people have had enough, says Elliot, and I think he is absolutely right. Where do we go from here? That's what I want to do, because someone needs to pull the ripcord in number 10. Not let's have a little debate, let's make a speech and say we can't become an island of strangers, and then the next week go, oh, I shouldn't have said that and I didn't actually say it, it was just written on an autocue and I read it out, and even the person who wrote the speech hadn't made the connection. What sort of a useless Prime Minister are you that you don't even know the words coming out of your mouth? What sort of an inept idiot are you that you then have to recant something that you've just blindly read off an autocue? It was the best sentence you've ever uttered in your life, you absolute despicable idiot. Oh, for crying out loud. I just don't know where we go from here. I really don't. But what I would say is this. Protest, yes. Violence, never. Ever. Make your voices heard. Do what you can. Write to your MPs. Make them know that they will never, ever have the privilege of representing your constituency ever again. But be careful. Be careful, because we need to be listened to. OK, right, let's read some of these messages and then ping off to an advert break. Alex, unfortunately, the lefties, many of whom appear on Talk, really? Think we're all racist and the country is absolutely fine. This is the thing, actually. There are so many people. When you say these people hate the country, I just think a load of them are blimmin' brainwashed themselves. Hi, lovely Alex, says Jenny in Sheffield. Any Afghan people going to claim safety in the US for assisting them? Oh, try they might. I doubt good old J.D. Vance and Donald Trump or Tom Homan are going to sign up to that. What better way to end the week than Alex Phillips in the hot seat, says Ed in Salisbury. Probably by downing a vat of Chardonnay as well. Right, we're going to take a short break now, and then I'm going to be joined in the studio by a very dear friend of mine indeed, Mr. Niall Gardner, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher and now a top-notch foreign policy analyst over in Washington, D.C. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. And as promised, as Bill, Mr. Niall Gardner joins me in the studio, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, now top-notch foreign affairs wonk, shall we say, over in Washington, D.C. Now tell me about what is going on in America, because it's tempting to look at Trump's approach to immigration and say we need a bit of that. How are things working over there?
Well, I think, well, firstly, thank you very much for having me on the show, Alex. Great to see you. And I do think that Trump has been extremely successful with regard to border security, dealing with the whole issue of illegal migration. In fact, illegal border crossings into the United States have actually fallen around 95% actually under the Trump presidency. So a huge contrast to the open borders Joe Biden presidency, under which 10 million illegal migrants crossed into the United States. And most of those illegals are actually still in the US, but Trump is determined to send as many back as possible. And around 250,000 illegals have already been deported by the Trump presidency. So that's a very strong start. And my former Heritage colleague, Tom Homan, is the border czar in the United States. He's overseeing the whole border security deportation program, and it's a great start. And certainly I think the UK should be emulating what Trump is doing in the United States, securing the border, defending American sovereignty, and sending a clear message to illegals that if they try to come into the United States, they are not going to be allowed to do so, and illegals in the US will be ultimately deported.
Do you think we've got the mechanism to be able to do that in Europe, given we're bound up by various bits of legislation, given that when you look at the continent of Europe, it's sort of a bit bigger, but let's say equivalent to the United States of America. And so actually so much of our problems here, we get downstream from other countries in Europe with their open borders. And that you've then got all these people crossing over the channel into Dover. The French aren't doing much to help us.
The French have been absolutely useless. In fact, I think Macron is actively, deporting illegal migrants from France to the UK. And Keir Starmer is so cowardly and weak-kneed that he's not standing up to the French here. It's an absolute outrage. And of course, Britain needs to get out of all of these useless international conventions and really leave, of course, European courts that suppress British national sovereignty and self-determination. Donald Trump doesn't care about international courts. He cares about the sovereignty of the United States of America and defending America's borders. This is what the British government should be doing with regard to British borders, but we've got a Labour government that is cowardly, useless, and bows down, of course, to the European Union, kowtows even to the French. And that's utterly pathetic and humiliating, I think, for Britain.
I mean, does Trump need to have agreements with other countries to deport people back to them? Because we always say, well, we haven't got a deportation agreement. And if we're going to do that, that means we've got to make friends with the Taliban and give them some money if we're going to send people back to Afghanistan. How is he doing this when it comes to people from countries that might not have a cosy relationship with America?
Yeah, well, he's negotiating, of course, a series of agreements with countries across the world, including African nations, actually, to take illegal migrants. But he's also, of course, sending back to their own countries of origin large numbers of illegals. So basically, the US administration is being very proactive in terms of ensuring that they can get rid of the worst of the worst. And just this week, the Trump administration announced that they're sending several extremely nasty illegal migrants, rapists, murderers, off to Eswatini, which formerly is known as Swaziland, and Swaziland has negotiated a deal with the United States to take these monstrous criminals, actually. So this is just the beginning.
Oh, what, they're going to be put in prisons or something in Eswatini?
I presume so.
So one assumes this doesn't fall into line with what the UN thinks America should do or how they should act.
I don't think President Trump cares one bit what the United Nations.
So I mean, this is what I've always said. You can break international law. It's not like there's some sort of international law jail where they're going to stick Donald Trump for saying we're not going to actually abide by the parameters of this particular treaty.
The US president represents the American people, and the United States is sovereign. It doesn't bow down to any international court. It doesn't bow down to the UN. President Trump is accountable to the American people. The vast majority of Americans want to see the deportation of illegal migrants from the United States. So this is a very popular policy. And this is a US administration that does what is in the interests of the American people. At the end of the day, that's what a US president should be doing. In contrast, of course, to Joe Biden, who was hugely ineffective and weak. Trump is a very strong leader.
There has been a backlash, though. We saw the massive protests in LA that sort of, looked like they were going to tip over into violence, all the usual lefty do-gooders creating roadblocks and things like that. Has that settled down now? Is Tom Homan able to get on with his job without too many of these people kicking off?
Yeah, so of course you're seeing, the woke lefty protests, some of which are quite violent, actually, against immigration enforcement officials. But we are seeing the Trump administration applying significant force, actually, to ensure...
Using the National Guard at one point,
using the National
Governor
Guard,
Newsom in California was like, you can't do that. And he said, I will.
Even federal troops to enforce American law. The rule of law really matters. And so immigration officials are able to carry out the work even in Los Angeles with pockets of neighbours with huge numbers of illegal migrants, actually. And so there are no no-go areas in the United States in terms of immigration enforcement. This is a presidency that is determined to enforce the rule of law.
I want to talk about the way that America perceives Europe, because there's this big tariff war going on at the moment. Europe sort of thought it could stretch things out, use its usual sort of behemoth bureaucratic nonsense to maybe put in retaliatory measures or actually make Donald Trump climb down. He just keeps upping the ante. And I wonder how much of this is tied to the perception of Europe by both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Because when it was the Munich Security Conference, J.D. Vance came along and said to Europe, you've messed up your continent.
Yeah.
You're no longer defending European values. You've thrown it all to the dogs. He made a quip, of course, that the first Islamist states with a nuclear weapon would end up being the United Kingdom. And people said, oh, that's appalling, that's disgusting. And then some of us thought, well, he's got a point, doesn't he?
Yeah.
How much of this sort of posturing over trade might be connected to the big wake-up call message coming from Washington, D.C. to the capitals around Europe that they're not doing enough to put their own country's interests first?
Those are great questions, Alex. And I do think that President Trump is a big supporter of the transatlantic alliance. He likes Europe. He doesn't like the European Union. He does not like supranationalism. He doesn't like Eurofederalism. He believes that the European project is fundamentally against the American national interest. Actually, he views it as fundamentally undemocratic as well. And President Trump is a huge supporter of Brexit and self-determination. And so Trump is the first Eurosceptic American president. He is backing sovereignty and self-determination in Europe. That's a really great thing, actually, to see that. A president who really stands with those in Europe who want to be free of the shackles of the European Union. And I think the whole trade issue is a big part of that. Trump wants to break down the EU's protectionist barriers, to break down the common agricultural policy, for example, dearly beloved of French farmers. And he wants access for American farmers to European markets. And so he is actually taking on the protectionist mindset of the European Union. And the EU is the world's biggest protectionist racket. They pretend to stand for free trade. They are heavily protectionist. And Trump has thrown down the gauntlet. He actually does want to see genuine free and fair trade with Europe, but the European Union needs to lift those barriers and genuinely pursue free trade. That's what Trump wants to see ultimately.
We know that we have the Donald coming over to pay us a visit in September. Who can forget that sort of obsequious, oh God, lick spittle, horrible, pulling that little invitation out of his pocket, pouring Donald's kiss and going, hi, would you like to come and sit in a royal carriage? It's pathetic. I mean, what we have is a president of the United States who really wants to see British interests upheld, and a prime minister who frankly doesn't seem to, and yet they seem to get along just fine. When Obama came to visit, oh, it was like the second coming, wasn't it? It was like the end times. Christ is back. Let's roll out the red carpet. Come and share your wisdom to the green benches. But Donald Trump's not going to be able to address our parliament, is he?
Yeah, it's an absolute disgrace that President Trump has not been invited to address Parliament. This is a very cynical and also cowardly move by Keir Starmer. I mean, firstly...
You think it was deliberate?
Oh, absolutely. It's 100% deliberate. There's no doubt about it. The state visit actually begins the day after the House of Commons rises, actually. And so this is undoubtedly...
Goes on their holly bombs,
it's all about, politics, really, here. And so Starmer fears members of his own Labour Party acting in a rude, boorish manner, of course, when Trump, if Trump spoke to Parliament. Secondly, he fears the message that Trump would give, actually, to Parliament, which would be pro-Brexit, anti-EU, the defence of national sovereignty. I wouldn't be surprised if President Trump calls for freedom of speech in the UK. After all, a lot of people have been locked up for their tweets in Britain, strongly condemned, actually, by the Trump presidency. And so Starmer fears, of course, the message that Trump will give, all about sovereignty, self-determination, freedom, all of the things that should be in place in the UK and Europe, of course. And so I think we're dealing with an incredibly cowardly, far-left Labour government here, actually. And a lot of Labour cabinet ministers in the past have attacked and condemned Trump. Some very nasty comments. David Lammy, I think, has been the worst British foreign secretary, I think, of the modern era.
Does Trump know these things? Does he care?
I think he does. Most important, of course, for President Trump is meeting with the King and the visit to Windsor.
But is he aware, potentially, that essentially, I'm going to read between the lines of what you're intimating here, is Sir Keir Starmer is playing to his ego. He's saying, come along, sit in the royal carriage, go and meet the King, have your ego stroked, have the photos, the handshake. We're going to treat you like a god amongst us, at least on the surface. But you ain't going to be allowed to speak to us.
Yeah.
You're not going to be allowed to voice your opinions. You're not going to address Parliament. We're going to do all we can to box you off, but actually we don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
is Trump cognisant of that?
Yeah, I think that there is going to be a lot of momentum building in Washington in the coming weeks for the president to be given the right to speak to Parliament, just as Barack Obama spoke to Parliament many years ago, and recently Emmanuel Macron, who knifed Britain in the back at every opportunity. He was given the opportunity to speak to Parliament. I do think that it's only a matter of time before President Trump says that he needs to speak to the British people in Parliament, and there'll be tremendous pressure on Keir Starmer to reverse course here. And I do think the decision not to invite President Trump is hugely insulting. It's disrespectful towards Britain's closest friend and ally, and I think it's an absolute disgrace. And I do think there's a very good chance that this will be reversed following pressure from the United States. I think that pressure is going to build. And I do think it's only a matter of time before President Trump himself actually directly addresses this issue.
One senses that a certain foreign policy analyst in the Heritage Foundation, Trump's favourite think tank, might be stirring that pot a bit and making sure that
I'll be calling
gets that message.
I'll be calling for President Trump to be invited to speak to Parliament, and as the leader of the free world, he should be given that opportunity. And Keir Starmer has, behaved, I think, in an absolutely appalling manner, should be ashamed of himself, frankly, for not issuing an invitation.
You're a tenacious man. I've known you a while, Niall. And what people might not know about this wonderful Brit who's over at the heart of operations in Washington, D.C., banging the drum for British interests, is that you might have had something to do with questioning whether or not Prince Harry has a right to continue to be a citizen of America by asking for whatever was on that visa application to be exposed. Now, this went to court.
Yes.
We all sat there thinking, is it going to happen? Is it going to be exposed that he admitted to taking drugs? And for whatever reason, they decided that this wasn't going to go into the public domain. But you haven't given up your fight, have you?
No, absolutely. The fight continues, and we're now urging the State Department, actually, to release Prince Harry's immigration records. And so we are increasingly confident that ultimately we will see the release of Prince Harry's immigration records. So that battle continues. This is a matter, I think, of real public interest in the United States. Did Prince Harry lie on his immigration application? That would be a criminal offence if he lied. And if he did lie, he would face either deportation or imprisonment in the United States. Do
you honestly think that could happen, though? Or would actually, when push comes to shove, someone like Donald Trump look at this and think, actually, that's going to spoil the special relationship? It's going to be an affront to the British people if we suddenly deport their prince?
I think that President Trump, of course, would leave that to the legal process. But anyone who actually lies on an immigration application would normally be subject to deportation or up to 5 years in prison in the United States. So the stakes are very, very high. No one is above the law, and I think the president would actually let the legal process work on that front. And if Harry was removed from the United States, I think that would be hugely popular among the American people. Of course, very few people in Britain would like to see Harry come back here. I suspect he would go to Canada or to France, but I don't think he would end up in the UK. I don't think there'd be any negative impact on the special relationship at all. In fact, Prince Harry is hugely unpopular in the United Kingdom among the British people. He's very unpopular within the royal family itself.
Is Dad still our king, though?
Dad's still the king, but the reality is that Harry has treated his own father and his brother, William, in an absolutely horrible way, a horrible fashion. I don't think there's any path back for Prince Harry. And if he is removed from the United States, if he lied on his application, I think that would be actually applauded by most Americans, and of course many in Britain as well, would believe that Harry should be subject to the rule of law wherever he is, and he has treated the royal family and the British monarchy in an absolutely disgraceful fashion. And also Meghan Markle has done the same as well. I mean, she's been an absolute disgrace. And so, but you know, the battle continues, and our view is that ultimately we will prevail. We will see the release of those records, and if Prince Harry has nothing to hide, he should support the release of those immigration records himself.
Ooh, well, I'll wait with bated breath to see what unfolds. Niall Gardner, it's a blessing to have you here on a visit to the UK, but a blessing more that you're going to go back to Washington, DC and keep fighting the good fight and banging the drum for Britain over there, because how important it is indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Right, OK, we're going to be taking a short break now, but when I come back, oh yes, our favourite festival of them all, diversity, celebration, joy, inclusion, the Notting Hill Carnival is coming up soon. Don't worry about the violence though, because police are going to be using facial recognition. That ought to do it. We'll be discussing that after this.
Well, clearly both of them massive stories, the Afghan scandal on the front page of the Sun today. But I mean, what is really gripping, I think, the nation at the moment is Keir Starmer's pretty shameless ruse to have 1.5 million 16 and 17-year-olds to vote at the next election. And what you are hearing from the Labour government is an attempt to justify this as expanding the democratic exercise. But actually, most people will see it for what it is, which is basically a ploy for Labour to try and boost their chances at the next election.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello Hello there and welcome back to the show. Now, Notting Hill Carnival, it's almost like I set my clock right in my diary. Every year I get to go on a big old rant because I hate that carnival. I went once upon a time and frankly it was just grim. I actually do like a lot of Caribbean music. I like my soca, I like my dancehall. I spent a long time living in West Africa. Don't mind a good old dance, and you try to keep me away from that fried chicken. But what I do not care for is the fact that it ends up as one giant crush with people urinating in gardens, smashing bus shelters, all the windows of the shops have to be boarded up, the local residents are terrorised and have to flee for the country, and there's constantly a risk of not just murders but massive crowd crushes. And I've said for a long time now, wouldn't it just be better to put it somewhere like Hyde Park, where you can manage the entrance and the egress and make it ticketed? Even if the tickets are free, you'd then have the information, wouldn't you, of who is attending, so when they do wrong, oh, you might be able to pluck them out. They'd actually be forced to walk through bag searches and body checks rather than some optional, you know, knife barrier thing, some metal detector, where you see it last time, they put the metal detector up in the street and one in sort of 25 people just walked through it because they weren't packing, and most people just walked around the outside. What is the point of that? Don't you worry though, because this year police are going to use facial recognition cameras at Notting Hill Carnival to crack down on the violence. Will that prevent people going and stabbing other people up? Let's ask Roy Ram, who's former commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard. I mean, it's good to see the police acknowledging that Notting Hill Carnival seems to have an inordinate amount of violence attributed to it for what is supposed to be a celebration. Is facial recognition going to work to make this year's carnival less gruesome?
No. The short answer, what it will do is it will allow the police officers to have a better chance of finding people who are involved in crime probably after the event. But, you know, there's a couple of million people on the streets. It's a sprawling, uncontrolled mass. And even if you identify somebody through facial recognition, you've then got to send officers into the crowd to pull them out, and that's not going to happen. That's going to cause more disruption and going to be extremely dangerous for the police officers. So in terms of follow-up inquiries, yes, it could be very good in supporting investigations. But, you know, there's going to be 7,000 plus police officers abstracted from normal duties to police this event. I think the last figures that were available was in 2023 in terms of cost. It costs just under £12 million to police this event. 12 million. This is a massive, massive abstraction of police resources across the capital, which is suffering, I have to say, suffering some pretty serious crime. And that's where those officers really need to be, not trying to police this dreadful crush. And I kind of feel that, you know, this time next week or you know, shortly after the carnival, we're going to be having this conversation of what went wrong. How did so many people get assaulted? You know, the crime. Last year, 2 people were murdered. One actually at the event, one nearby. The number of police officers injured, 70, 90, whatever it's going to be, being spat on, bit at, stabbed. It is just an intolerable situation.
But it's not just that. Local businesses are terrorised. They lose trade. They have to spend loads boarding up their windows. Local residents don't feel safe. They've got to flee for safety while their properties get used as latrines. But yet every single time someone tries to say something commonsensical, which is you could probably have more fun if you did it in a big park. You could probably get more food stands and dance stages and massive speakers and DJs and everyone would be safe. The organisers go, you can't do that. That's racist. That's a terrible thing to suggest. So are we just going to have to continue with the farce of watching this thing take place, trashing the neighbourhood until the point, let's say, there's some sort of fatal crush? Because I don't know, I've never stayed long enough to see how bad and as busy as it gets. But looking at footage, it seems to me we're a whisker away from there being one too many people piled into an area where there might be an outbreak of violence. Everyone's trying to get out of the zone and people end up being trampled.
Yeah, and I think when you hear Sadiq Khan actually saying that he feared the crush, you know, this is not sort of idle speculation from right wingers who are in any sense racist about this. This is everybody recognising that this number of people in tight London streets is just too dangerous. You know, we are on the edge of a Hillsborough type situation here, where, as you rightly say, it will take a catastrophic event, I fear, to get people to agree to move it to Hyde Park. And you're right. And you know, you listed some of the additional features that could be implemented in the park, including public lavatories. But you're right. I mean, the clear up. I've already quoted the policing cost, but the actual cost of the event to individuals, homeowners, businesses is probably another several £1 million to support this event. And it frightens me every year. I think, you know, I look, the first day is usually okay, but that doesn't stop the drug dealers and it doesn't stop some of the criminality. You've only got to look at the number of arrests that are made. But once you get to that second day, to the kind of the big event, if it's a sunny, hot day, then, you know, we're going to be looking at several hundred arrests. We're going to be looking at real danger in the streets. And I think it's quite fearful.
What's it like to police it?
Do you know, I have to say, I haven't policed it for many years. I first went there in the 70s, and it was difficult then, frankly. It was extremely difficult. And, you know, the briefing then was quite clear. Don't put yourself in danger. But I think now, you know, the number of officers that I've spoken to over the years that have been there, they go with a big heart. You know, they want it to be a nice event, but they fear for their safety.
Yeah, I can imagine they do. Roy Ram, thank you ever so much for coming on and sort of busting this myth that facial recognition is suddenly going to make the Notting Hill Carnival safe. I doubt it. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because we've got so many more topics to get our teeth into. Stephen Wolf and Kinsey Schofield coming up in the last hour of the programme. I'll see you on the other side of these.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this is rather an interesting development. Oh, welcome back, by the way. Well, welcome aboard if you've only just joined us. Where have you been? No doubt being productive and contributing to the economy so you can pay for more of these people to come and stay in hotels. Thank you ever so much. But listen, if you have only just joined us and therefore you've missed all the greatness of the first 2 hours of the show, fear not, because you can go back and watch it on YouTube at your leisure, whatever you're doing. If you're mowing the lawn, I'll be there in your ear if you want me to be. If you're driving to pick up the kids from the school gates, I can join you on that journey as well. If you're, I don't know, whatever, cooking dinner tonight and you think, oh, I didn't listen to Alex's show for the first 2 hours and I kind of fancy listening to her ranting and her raving and the common sense of her brilliant guests, then you can go onto the Talk app or on YouTube and watch from the beginning. Lots of you do. So join them. Anyway, it's talking about this story. The girl who sort of dressed up a bit like Ginger Spice because they were having a cultural day at school and you're supposed to go in representing a particular culture, and she thought, I'm going to go and represent Britain, my own culture. She wore a Union flag dress and the school went, how dare you? That is racist. That's appalling. Detention right now. She was made to go and change. She was made to wear second-hand school uniform as a punishment for deigning to celebrate her own nation's flag. Well, it turns out that that school has been forced to close early for the summer over extremist threats. I don't know what the extremist threats are, but a letter to parents said the nature and tone of abuse has escalated in recent days, including personal threats to staff. While we've been working closely with our multi-agency partners to address the situation, our primary responsibility remains the safety and well-being of every child and member of staff. This is not a decision we have taken lightly. We understand the disruption this may cause to your families and your child's education, but the safety of our school community must come first. The letter ended by thanking parents and guardians for their understanding and continued support during a very challenging time. What were these extremist threats? Who's making them? What's going on here? Doesn't say, but let's see if we can find out. Anyway, let's get back to the big old story of the day. No, before we do that, actually, there's something even bigger I want to draw your attention to, because two of my favourite human beings on this here planet, Mr. James Whale, OBE, and the leader of Reform UK, Mr. Nigel Farage, both dear friends of mine and titans within their own spheres, have done what could end up being James Whale's final interview. The Talk presenter and broadcasting supremo has said that it probably is going to be the last time he sits down for a conversation as he battles terminal cancer. It's a compelling interview. He's very emotional. He sits down with Nigel, who's one of his long-term friends, at his home in Kent, and he looks back upon not just his legendary broadcasting career, but also takes the opportunity to quiz our Nige over the world of politics. Let's have a look.
The MEP thing, of course, for many, many years, although I'm not sure I took it that seriously. You know, we did talk all those years ago about you running for London Mayor. We ended up with Sadiq. It might have been better if we'd had you, James.
That's not my fault, by the way. We were going, my wife at the time were going to LBC, or to LBC, to ITV, and she turned to me and she said, you know, they're taking you seriously. And I said, well, that's good, isn't it? She said, no, you need to decide before you go on air now whether you want to be an MP or you want to be a broadcaster. And I couldn't see why I should, because I'm quite a good broadcaster and I thought I could be quite a good member of Parliament. And I thought, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if I do something wrong, if I actually overtread the mark, then sack me or fine me or do something like that. But why should I have freedom taken away?
What an interesting way of looking at it. It's something that I kind of think about myself, politics or broadcasting or politics, and I quite like sitting here in this chair doing what I do, but nobody can fill the boots of Mr. James Whale. And, you know, I tell you what, once upon a time I actually had drinks with the both of them down at his local pub. Yeah, I was there. I got to indulge in a few bottles of wine in the company of both Nigel and James, and it was just such a memorable occasion because, well, both of them are brilliant in their own domains, but also such great men, such humorous people. That is going to be an interview you do not want to miss. One of a kind. It's at 10 o'clock tonight here on Talk, so do tune in. OK, right, let's get back to the big story of the day as protesters are now clashing with police outside an Essex migrant hotel. This has been going on for a number of days now and doesn't seem to be dying down at all. Epping Forest, after a particular resident of the Bell Hotel in that particular town was alleged to have committed crimes against women within 8 days of arriving. Dragged in front of Chelmsford magistrates, accused of trying to kiss a 14-year-old girl. He denies the allegations. The people of Epping Forest have said enough is enough. You stuck this hotel right in the middle of our town. It's full of men from different cultures. We're worried for the safety and integrity of our daughters. They've had enough, and they're making it known. Let's speak to Stephen Wool, former MEP and director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Does this foretell what is to come, Stephen? First of many, do you reckon?
I think it's already the second or third of many. We only have to have a look at what happened in Southport as a consequence of the views of people saying that migrants had come in and caused immeasurable harm to children. That was a vile crime. Admittedly, that person that day wasn't someone that had come from a channel boat or was an asylum seeker, but we do have asylum applicants that have murdered a Conservative MP. We've had asylum applicants who have committed crimes across the country, and so people are now absolutely fed up. But just, Alex, it's not just here. Only 4 or 5 days ago in southern Spain, in Tranconi, there were clashes between migrants and the people of Spain over similar aspects of violence against Spanish people there. In that case, an elderly man was attacked. We have it in Poland, where they are already getting fed up by those people who are coming across the border from Germany, that they've closed the borders. So the issues here now are not those that our elites are considering about wars in Ukraine and keeping the boats and the borders open. They're beginning to fail to understand that their lack of humanity, their lack of understanding, their lack of care towards the people of this country when it comes to mass immigration is now leading to its breakdown in a fairly rapid way, because the police are not stopping these crimes. The police are not investigating the crimes as much as people believe they are, and they're not being sentenced, and when they are, they're not being deported. So all people have is one choice, to do it for themselves.
Now, I'm so glad you raised the case that a lot of the time the police aren't necessarily investigating these crimes, which means they're not resulting in charges. I've had a whistleblower tell me directly that as a policeman he was called to a fracas within a migrant hotel, and it was suggested, listen, don't do anything about this, because if you drag people off to the police station, it's just going to create further reprisals and the violence will get worse. And you have to imagine in the case of women being harassed, I've seen plenty of videos circulating on social media of men approaching young girls. I mean, if you're like me and you do the doom scrolling on X, you would have seen them too.
Yes,
and
we do.
And it's very unlikely that when incidents like that are recorded, that ends up in a charge or a court case. And what court records are showing is that 1 in 100 migrants housed in hotels has been hauled before magistrates this year. 1 in 100. And that, as you're alluding, and I agree, is probably the tip of the iceberg. And we're not just talking about because they've, I don't know, lied on their asylum applications. No, we're talking about rape, robbery, GBH. And I'm interested in what you have to say about Spain, because I followed those protests quite closely. Similar as well, protests in Ireland, similar ones happening in France, in Spain, everywhere, all over Western Europe. My understanding is in Spain, of course, the legacy media of this country didn't report on it at all, but hundreds of thousands turned out onto the streets because a migrant gang were attacking pensioners there.
Yes, and I followed that because I was actually doing a small investigation in Greece, where I was watching the numbers coming across, because there are people who taking the views that Europol and Frontex are saying that only 285,000 people are coming across on the various routes. But whilst we were there were 2,500 people come over each day for 3 days. So the belief is that the numbers that we're being told are actually entering Europe, which will eventually lead to them coming across to Britain, of course, are actually much smaller. And what we're seeing now is a mass hiding of numbers by governments of the truth. And we've seen that recently, despicably, by former MPs and ministers of our defence, who hid the fact that they were trying to stop 100,000 people from Afghanistan coming into our country, a total of 7 billion. And let me put this to Alex in terms of the numbers that I contemplated. 7 billion in terms of that, add to the 12 billion it's costing us a year anyway to cover immigration. And then we saw 8 billion in terms of benefits. That is a total of 27 billion pounds. That's the equivalent of £1,000 in tax for every citizen who pays tax out of the 33 million in this country. That's equivalent to nearly £4,000 net income that we're now spending on asylum seekers, Afghans, and crime and benefits related to it.
What we know about some of the crime statistics that have been garnered from journalists at The Telegraph and freedom of information requests from people like you and other people who actually have the bravery and courage to look into this and try and get the empirical evidence to put in front of our leaders, and so we might finally be listened to, is when it comes to sexual offences, Afghans are among the nations who are significantly overrepresented as the perpetrators of those crimes. And so what we are potentially faced with is every taxpayer paying £1,000 that's then enabling young men coming from countries where women are treated worse than dogs to behave in a similar way, to bring those attitudes and those behaviours to this country. And not just that, to regard our girls as perfectly valid in order to be targeted, because they see them as lesser, because they're Western girls, because they don't cover up, because they might be teenagers drinking on a park bench and taking things a little bit too far. And I think that more than the economic argument, when men in this country think that the threat is towards their women, their daughters, their sisters, their cousins, that is when all of a sudden it becomes intolerable, just as it was after Southport. Stephen, what is going to happen? Because the government's not listening. These people are still all coming. We know the lawyers are going to be using the ECHR to force us to accept 1,000 more Afghans. The cover-ups can only go so far because people aren't stupid. People can put videos on social media. They soon learn about events happening within their own communities. Do you think the cork can stay in the bottle for much longer? Because without doubt, the repressive way which this government dealt with the Southport protests, I believe, was designed to try and stop things spilling over again, but I'm not sure the centre's going to hold.
I don't think it is. And there's something very strange about the groups of people that sit at the top of our country that have watched the grooming gangs rape 250,000 girls in this country, and yet seem to accept that that's normal, that's acceptable, just as long as we have integration in this country. And yet we see every day that this integration is not happening. They also seem to have a mentality that they believe that just because we can bring 100,000 over from Afghanistan, these crimes will disappear, and that they will become just like us, and kind, generous, and understand our own cultural values, when the evidence, as you've pointed out today, 1 in 100 of those in asylum applicants in hotels are committing crimes. When we see the vast numbers of criminal actions being taken by those who are not born in this country, the evidence is placed before them, and yet they ignore it. And so the cork, I think, is already out. I think it's just that it's not popping like a champagne cork. I think they're just bubbling around the edges. It's pushing us out. And you're right. I do believe that the Southport riots and how heavy-handed our government was towards people on that is because they're frightened of actually human beings in this country saying enough is enough and it's time that we take control. What they would regard as the mob, of course, because that will be their mentality, rather than decent individuals who fed up and had enough and said, you're no longer protecting us, so you should do. And I think it started. You've seen it all across Europe. Ireland was a very big example of that. It's only a matter of time before Britain reaches a situation very similar to it. And I'm sad that it's had to get this stage. I don't really want it to explode in the way that people see it. But when will our governments understand the people's needs, not their own?
It's amazing how many politicians pay lip service to the concept of integration. And yet everything they seem to put in place to try and create integration seems to be us spending to their cultures, us celebrating their cuisine, their clothing, their religions, us giving them translators, never the other way around. And I've not heard anybody come out of a single policy yet, not one suggestion, not anybody who can do anything about this, about how the magical word integration is actually enforced. You know, Stephen, I would love to have a winged horse and fly about the skies instead of taking the tube, but it ain't possible. And what I've come to realise is when people come of an age where which they've been brought up, trained, lived in a culture which is totally different to ours, by the time they get to 18, 19, 20 and above, it's too late. They don't suddenly have some Damascene revelation and realise they want to be a Judeo-Christian and follow all the Western values at all. So how do we manage to get to the point that people who are here, we can't really do anything when they are in our midst, or perhaps we can, or might be able to do something. But there are so many people here who are not integrated, and yet politicians say they must be. We must build bridges, not create barriers. I want to know how, because none of the suggestions that seem to be made seem to be enforcing British cultural values.
Well, you've already pointed out about that young girl who was banned from her school for simply wearing a British dress of a pop band and then wanted to give a statement of what it is to be British. I'm English. I'm English first, I'm British second, and I'm very proud of my nation, its history, of those who fought, like the Levellers and the Diggers and those at the Magna Carta, the history of our English written language from Shakespeare, our artists and our explorers, the way that we've challenged the globe and brought democracy to thousands of places across the globe. I'm deeply proud of that. And those people who come to this country should also be proud of that. And the only way that I would ask any person who demands that we have integration is I will ask them at what point anywhere in history, at what culture, at what timing, Romans onwards, have you ever had a culture where integration has actually happened, where you've had mass immigration, unless it's by force? They will not be able to point to one, and that is why in this country we must have a view now, and I think that view is beginning to formulate. That is, we detain and deport criminals and the illegals from this country, and that the only integration that matters with the British culture, and if you don't like it, then you shouldn't be here. And I think that's a historical context that people are now beginning to understand may well be the only solution.
What does that look like, Stephen? What's the nuts and bolts of that? What sort of, you know, if you're going to sort of come up with a list of 3 policies, what would they be?
Well, they would be that we have to celebrate our own flag and our national identity. We don't have integration days like that girl had to face. I don't believe we should have cultural days like that, not certainly done in school. And I think when we come down to classes such as history, and I've looked at my own daughters in my own school, in her first year at school, it was pitted by places like Islam and places across the globe. There was only one aspect of the 6 or 7 different modules that talked about the beauty of English history. So in that sense, we should only be talking about English history for, say, the first 2 or 3 years of our schools. So that's very important to place it back at the forefront of education. We should have a St. George's Day, which is celebrated by all across the country, and we should stop refunding all those different marches and events across the country for different cultures.
It would certainly be a start. Stephen Wolfe, thank you ever so much, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Do you know what? There seem to be a lot of detractors of Western civilization, a lot of people who think that the 2,000 years of success that we have enjoyed, both in Europe and over in America, and of course our cousins in Australia, New Zealand and Canada in the Anglosphere, is mortgageable. That you can kick it, you can beat it, you can tell it it's wrong, that it's been colonial, that it's evil, that it must sort of be subservient to other cultures and other countries. And I would say this, you want to get rid of Western civilization, then you can throw in the dustbin of history everything it brought. There'll be no more innovations, no more medical advancements, there'll be no more future of IT and AI and .com, there'll be no more democracy and rule of law and progression and tolerance, because that is the stuff that Western civilization has brought. That's what it means. You want to chuck that away? Good luck to the planet. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be joined by the wonderful, effervescent, ever-entertaining and erudite Kinsey Schofield. We're going to be talking, of course, about the latest going on with those two in Montecito. That's after this.
But if we are able to expand that scheme so that we can send everyone who comes over back, then it won't be worth their trying to come across. And therefore, there will be no return.
No, but it's not. But that's not the deal. The deal is not let's send them all back and we don't get anything in return. The deal is if we send 50 back, we get 50 coming the other way.
Yes, the deal is a pilot scheme.
How is that? Well, no, it's a pilot scheme. 2, you've said if quite a few times. 3, it's going to cost us a lot more money.
Oh, clearly both of them massive stories. The Afghan scandal on the front page of the Sun today. But I mean, what is really gripping, I think, the nation at the moment is Keir Starmer's pretty shameless ruse to hand 1.5 million 16 and 17-year-olds to vote at the next election. And what you are hearing from the Labour government is an attempt to justify this as expanding the democratic exercise. But actually, most people will see it for what it is, which is basically a ploy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I am so excited right now. Like, if you could have seen me when she came into the studio, we just looked at each other, and it's like being in an American rom-com or something, or like some sort of high school movie. We're like, it's you, IRL. I'm joined by Kinsey Schofield. I love you, Kins, and you're in town.
I love you too. It should have been in slow motion. It should have been captured, but I think the audience understands that this is a good combination right here.
This is the one. Forever this should be the case. What isn't a good combination, or perhaps it is a good combination, like Fred and Rose West, who knows, you might not understand that reference, is Harry and Meghan, because they seem to be designed for each other, to blight the rest of the world. And yet, after everything that they've done, it seems to me there being a chit-chat going on between their representatives and the representatives of the palace sitting there. What are they discussing, do you reckon?
I think that they're discussing we're broke, we're miserable, we've made a mistake, without any of those blatantly being said. I mean, Meghan has basically become one of those people you turn on the TV at midnight and they're trying to sell you a cozy pair of slippers and a robe. This was a woman that was a duchess. She got to she would walk into a school and children would run and throw their arms around her. She was a leader. She was I mean, I think she was a respectful person, and then she decided to give it all away to sell loose fruit spread and alcohol. And I think that there are some serious regrets. I think that they realized not only is this hustle never ending, having to come up with new products, having to churn out all of these ideas, having to find people you can rely on in case you do sell out of loose fruit spread, let's pretend. I think that they realized that that's going to be harder, having themselves been branding themselves the villains, going after this institution that is so loved all over the world.
Why can't they just live within their means? I mean, he comes with a sizable inheritance. They must have made a bob or two already by Archwell Foundation's useless podcasts or whatever it is, and the Netflix series which nobody really watched apart from when they're calling everyone a racist. So they must have a few sort of, you know, dollars in the bank. Can't they just go, well, you know, that's it, we'll just have a quiet life and bring up our kids and feed some chickens and pretend we know what to do with a beehive?
I think that Meghan is a very materialistic person. I think Prince Harry could figure it out. I think that he could wear the same suit over and over again and doesn't need all. I mean, Meghan, when we see Meghan Markle today, she's wearing thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in jewelry alone. That's not like the $6,000 jacket she's wearing in the middle of June that she wants to ensure we see her papped in. I think that she's very materialistic, and it's her that they have to keep up with. And when you're materialistic, I also think you probably want your kids in the most expensive clothes. They've got 2 small children that she is taking around town, taking to school in Montecito, California. She's got to keep up with the Joneses. She has to keep up with these other very wealthy, high-profile individuals and their families. So I think it's mostly driven monetarily by Meghan's wants and needs.
It's also about that ego, isn't it? The narcissism. journalism. She needs a mug on the front pages of magazines. She needs to be receiving these fake awards and have people fawning over her and doing the hand holding and putting her hand on her husband's chest and beaming up at him like they've only just met and they're still in love.
Well, she says they still get butterflies. She says they still get butterflies. She said they're in their honeymoon period because when she was a working member of the British royal family, she just said this to Jamie Kern-Lima, when she was a member of the British royal family, they were in the trenches. Like, it's hard to be a princess, but she says that right now they're in their honeymoon phase. Literally, a week later, Harry goes on the BBC and looks like he's in the middle of a mental breakdown. He's so upset that he's just lost this UK court case, fighting for security. He's lost millions of dollars fighting for this security that everyone said, there's no way you're going to win this. So it's that contrast between the two narratives that they're both painting in the international media, where Meghan is sitting down going, my husband's a fox, we're in the honeymoon phase.
Do you think it is genuine love? I think on his part, I think he still looks at her with like heart emoji eyes and goes, I'm so lucky, she's so beautiful, look how clever she is. But I've heard that he's sort of, whether it's come from him or his PR people, is sort of wanting to take back control of his own charities, especially in Africa. I mean, the Queen said to them, why don't you guys, if you hate Britain so much, go relocate, do stuff in Africa, live there, do the whole, like, you know, clapping with the kids in the, you know, in the orphanages and looking at some elephants and having a nice safari, but also being do-gooders and basically having an extended gap year.
How is Meghan supposed to be famous in Africa? How is Meghan supposed to have her own Netflix show in Africa? How is Meghan supposed to be on the cover of Variety in the Cut in Africa? Meghan's ultimate objective has always been fame. It was not to make the world a better place. And I know that a lot of people are critical towards the British royal family, but I truly believe that with King Charles and Prince William, their ultimate objective is to leave the world better than they found it. Meghan Markle just wants to ensure that everybody knows the name Meghan Markle, and she's trying to rebrand now to Meghan Sussex. Good luck. But you're absolutely right. Why couldn't they have gone to Africa and done good? Harry is trying to rebrand himself. He just lost Senabale, the charity he formed in honor of his mother, because Meghan didn't get along with the head of Senabale, who called them a racist and misogynist over their behavior towards her. Meghan clashing with her at a polo event.
Shuffling her. Get out of shot. It's only me in this picture.
Exactly. We're hearing that Meghan won't be at Invictus 2027 because Harry sees that she's toxic for his brand. And when we look at him, we see this bitter, petty prince, and the only way that he can potentially escape that is to be seen with her less and to be seen copying his mother, I guess, more often than we see them complaining.
Isn't it? The two of them are just constantly in Diana cosplay. It's like, this is Freudian and weird, like gross. But you know what? If you want to be rid of a troublesome prince, I know just the man for the job, because I had Niall Gardner in here, who's at the Heritage Foundation. Look at what I've done, conveyor belt of excellence in the studio today. And Niall Gardner was the guy who was behind bringing the court case about exposing what Harry put on that visa application. Now, we know that nothing eventually came of it. We're all like, are they going to deport him for lying? Apparently, Niall's not finished. Have a watch of this.
Now urging the State Department actually to release Prince Harry's immigration records. This is a matter, I think, of real public interest in the United States. Did Prince Harry lie on his immigration application? That would be a criminal offence if he lied. And if he did lie, he would face either deportation or imprisonment in the United States. President Trump, of course, would leave that to the legal process. But anyone who actually lies on an immigration application would normally be subject to deportation or up to 5 years in prison in the United States. So the stakes are very, very high. No one is above the law, and I think the president would actually let the legal process work on that front. If he is removed from the United States, if he lied on his application, I think that would be actually applauded by most Americans, and of course many in Britain as well, would believe that Harry should be subject to the rule of law wherever he is, and he has treated the royal family and the British monarchy in an absolutely disgraceful fashion, and also Meghan Markle has done the same as well. I mean, she's been an absolute disgrace.
He's like a dog with a bone, is Niall. He's going after it again. There's going to be an appeal.
Well, first of all, I have to say, so the judge rules that he doesn't think it's of public interest. Prince Harry is saying that he thinks the First Amendment is bonkers. Using his First Amendment, he's on the Armchair Quarterback podcasts or whatever, saying the First Amendment is bonkers. He works with the Aspen Institute of Technology because he's trying to create laws around social media, the First Amendment and social media. He wants to, I've heard he's trying to buy up smaller newspapers so that he can have some sort of say in media narrative and headlines. Those things are incredibly concerning to Americans. Yes, I think it is important for us to know if he's legally in the country or if he lied on his application to enter the country. You know, this started under the Biden administration, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but Harry and Meghan's Archwell charity donated, I think it was $250,000 to Ashley Biden's charity, Joe Biden's daughter, which we only found out about because of Harry and Meghan's taxes, but Ashley didn't declare that donation on her taxes. I mean, I'm clearly trying to, you know, maybe inappropriately connecting some dots here, but we saw how fiercely the Biden administration protected Harry and Meghan. I don't think that if Niall continues to kick this can down the road, I don't think the Trump administration will be as protective of Harry and Meghan. And as Niall said before, the royals should never be involved, even non-working royals, in politics. And I think it was pretty blatant when Harry and Meghan endorsed Joe Biden, and not the last election, but the election before last. I thought that was pretty inappropriate. Why are you in our, or how did you get in our country? I think that's a fair question. We just want clarity.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question indeed. Although Donald Trump did, of course, say he's got enough on his plate with that wife of his,
right?
Which I thought was a classic line.
Yeah, very much
oh,
so.
Kinsey, it's such a delight to have you here. I wish I could keep you in the studio longer, but I've got to get paid, which means I've got to roll some commercials. But our very good friend Kevin O'Sullivan's coming up next, so you stay tuned and let's go out for drinks on Monday. Okay. See.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Aren't we being treated to a glut of excellence on the show today? The guests just keep getting better and better and better. Honestly, it's amazing sitting in this studio when you've got such brilliant contributors. That's all about to change because we're now joined by Mr. Kevin O'Sullivan. Hiya, Kev.
Yeah, your guest list just fell off a cliff.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done for now. But there's nothing I like more than just sitting down with you and having a good old rant about everything. We've got to start off talking about what's going on in Epping Forest. It's a screaming mess. People are upset. They have every right to be. But you kind of think, protest as much as you like. They ain't listening in Number 10. They ain't listening in the Cabinet Office. They're not having Cobra meetings saying, we've hit 11th hour and then some. We've really got to pull our fingers out and do something about this. So where do we go from here?
I mean, yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, as we discussed earlier in the week, I was covering this story on Monday because there'd been demonstrations from angry local people all weekend in Epping. Not that you'd know from the television news channels or the newspapers or anything. Last night, it got really bad. We were reporting on it live, watching stones and bricks being hurled at the police, people leaping over police vans, ripping off windshield, really getting nasty, running battles. Nothing. This morning you read Sky News' written report said, disturbances unfolded outside what is believed to be a hotel that accommodates that's believed to accommodate asylum seekers. It's not believed to accommodate asylum seekers. It's full of asylum seekers. This is a pretty little town to the north of London, Epping, by Epping Forest, and they've got a little hotel in the middle of it called the Bell Hotel, which is now home to more than 100 asylum seekers, mostly young men of sexually active age. And guess what? One of them, who arrived here on the 29th of June, within 8 days was in Colchester Magistrates Court, accused of allegedly attacking 3 local women, sexually assaulting them in just 2 days. Now, he denies those charges, but you can understand why the local community is upset. But of course, this is all the politicians on social media, disgraceful scenes from the far right and so on and so forth. Yes, some far-right thugs definitely went there looking for trouble. I'll tell you who else went there looking for trouble. Antifa, far-left thugs, who extraordinarily, before last night's proper demonstration, protest by parents, mothers, fathers, grandchildren, worried about safety for women, worried about safety for their kids on the streets. These Antifa people turn up at the station. The police escorted them into the middle of the riot, right outside the hotel. A little bit of a recipe for trouble, don't you think? And they've got their standard issue pathetic placards going, well, refugees, stop the far right, and all this, stop hate and all this. These people, just as much as, admittedly there are right-wing thugs who go looking for trouble, these are left-wing thugs looking for trouble, escorted lovingly by the police into the middle of the disturbances. Bit of a recipe for disaster, that.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's funny, when it's other protests, I remember when there's been pro-Palestine marches and people who are sort of more pro-Israel have been told, don't go near there, you're not allowed near them, it's just going to stir up even more discontent if the two sides face off. We even had that time when you had the sort of BLM riots and the far right, it's like, well, they've got to be kept completely separate. Then all of a sudden, it's like, oh no, you lefties with the, like you said, standing issue Socialist Workers' Party placards, come on in. Why don't you make it even worse? Poke the bear in the zoo, why don't you? It just beggars belief. But I don't know where we go from here.
You've got to ask yourself whose side are the police on. I've seen these pro-Palestine marches. I'll tell you whose side the police are on, the pro-Palestine marches. It's as simple as that. Whose side were they on last night? Looks to me like Antifa. Looks like the left-wing yobs were being protected or sanctioned by the police. The police have got to start being a little more impartial in the way they cover these disturbances. And by the way, what we've seen in Epping over the last few days, stand by for it to happen all over the country.
I was going to ask you about this, because this is where sometimes, I don't know if you ever get this, Kev, but sometimes I go to bed and I think, have I said something, a word too far today? Am I going to be accused of stoking up tensions because I want to talk about these issues? I think it is desperately important that we talk about these issues for the safety and security of girls, the integrity of our communities. And yet you kind of think, what if someone comes and points a finger at us right now and goes, oh, there you go. All the other media decided not to maximise on talking about what's going on in Epping Forest so as to sort of do their part in making sure there aren't copycat protests around the country. And here we are. We have the audacity to dare talk about it, so we're just as bad. Do you ever get that concern that they're going to come after us for talking about this stuff?
Well, yeah, I do, in this increasingly sinister country that we live. I read the Guardian report on last night's disturbances. In about the 48th paragraph, it finally mentioned that a local asylum seeker had been charged with sexual assault. it finally mentioned. Apart from that, you'd have thought it was just far-right thugs, you know, putting a pin in a map saying, where should we go and have a riot tonight? Oh, I know, let's try Epping, as if there was no reason for it at all, except they were far-right rioters. That's the only thing they said. When did journalists, so many journalists, decide that they had the right to morally decide what news is? News is news. You have to report it if you're going to be a proper journalist. What these journalists are doing is filling in with the establishment, fitting in with the great and the good, and trying to keep the reality of what is happening all over the country a secret. And that what is happening all over the country, you see in the Sun newspaper today, is that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of asylum seeker young men are being charged with more and more crimes and more sex crimes. You can try and keep a lid on that if you want, but it won't last long. This is a powder keg that is going to erupt.
And also, why should they keep a lid on it when girls are being attacked by men from other countries? I think we have every right to know about it and protest against it. Talking about journalistic values, the BBC are going to roll out anti-Semitism awareness training after a string of scandals. I don't know if you saw the leak from some sort of email and some presentation I think Deborah Turness, the head of news, did towards staff following that Hamas documentary.
We broke the story. We broke the story.
Saying there's a difference between Hamas militia and Hamas ministers. I mean, now they're going to roll out anti-Semitism training. What's that going to say?
She is the chief executive of news, the head of news, the head of all the journalists in the state broadcaster, and she doesn't know how Gaza is governed and doesn't realise that there is no difference between, say, a Hamas government minister and some Hamas yob walking the streets with a machine gun. She doesn't know that there is no difference, that they are all prescribed. She thought that the Hamas members of the government of Gaza were somehow legal and not proscribed. That is just shocking, shocking. The head of news at the BBC, and she's just had a pay rise. Guess how much too? £431,000 a year. It's just breathtaking. She's an ignoramus. She doesn't know how Gaza is governed. No wonder the BBC gets in all this trouble about its coverage of that region, because it doesn't understand it. Unbelievable. As for the anti-Semitism courses, I mean, in some ways, I got to say, well, thank God. It looks like someone at the BBC might have finally, the penny may have finally dropped, that just maybe the BBC has a tiny bit of an anti-Semitism problem. So in some ways, I suppose I applaud the fact they're going to offer anti-Semitism classes or courses to the staff. But you have to then step back and think, my God, they have to give anti-Semitism courses at the BBC, the state broadcaster that we pay for, the BBC that's supposed to be impartial. What the hell has gone wrong there? I suggest it might be the head of news.
Well, I'll tell you what, talking about anti-Semitism, don't you worry about that. Diane Abbott's at a loose end, haven't been suspended from the Labour Party. She can go and explain to the BBC that anti-Semitism isn't necessarily racism because Jews aren't necessarily black.
Exactly right. Well, in that letter to the Observer that got her in trouble, it was now about a couple of years ago, I think, that's when she sort of got suspended from the Labour Party before. She eventually offered a grudging apology and was sort of welcomed back in. Well, she's now been suspended again because she's doubled down on the letter and said she had no regrets. And what that letter essentially says is racism towards Jewish people isn't nearly as bad as racism towards people of colour, black people. She starts talking about, you know, Jews were never made to ride at the back of the bus in the south of America. Jews were never segregated, etc., etc. You might also say that perhaps you want to take on board that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. I think they have suffered from prejudice as much as any other people have suffered from prejudice, arguably worse. So Diane Abbott is wrong there. And of course, she won't care she's been kicked out of the Labour Party because she's going to join Hezbollah, isn't she? She's going to join Jeremy Corbyn's new party, is her old boyfriend, where they can be anti-Semitic and shout and scream about awful Jews as much as they like, while making the very important caveat, it's not Jews that we don't like. We reserve the right to object to Israel. No, Jeremy, No, Diane, it's Jews you don't like. We've got your number. Thank you.
Talking about having the number, I bet it's going to be such a loss to the Labour Treasury that Diane Abbott and her famous abacus aren't going to be helping Rachel Reeves do her sums to save the economy. Kevin, always great having you on the show. Of course, watch Kev tonight. Use your slot for the political asylum. You don't want to miss it. We're going to take a little break now, and it's the last section of the show, so your opportunity to have your voice heard and have a chit-chat with me. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. I'm going to try read out some of your messages as well, so don't go anywhere. Back after this.
Chief Constable Vanessa Jardine is clearly incapable of leading her police service effectively and, moreover, properly. She's not fit for service. She should go.
This is a very divisive, dangerous political ideology. And police officers have got no business taking part in a parade.
The Chief Constable Jardine has lost the plot in terms of the very fundamentals, the basic principles of policing, without fear or favour, with impartiality.
But if we are able to expand that scheme so that we can send everyone who comes over back, then it won't be worth their trying to come across, and therefore there will be no return.
No, but it's not. But that's not the deal. The deal is not let's send them all back and we don't get anything in return. The deal is if we send 50 back, we get 50 coming the other way.
Yes, the deal is a pilot scheme.
How is that? Well, no, it's a pilot scheme. Two, you've said if quite a few times. Three.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Aren't you in for a delightful little treat tonight? Because, well, it's rather poignant, actually, because it's likely to be our very own James Wales' final interview. James, of course, is battling terminal cancer, and he wanted to have one last opportunity to let the world know what he thinks and give us an opportunity to give him a fond farewell and celebrate his inimitable, unequalled broadcasting career as a titan, particularly of the Talk brand. So he sat down with one of his bezzers for a very long time now, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage, for a chit-chat in his garden in Kent. Have a look.
They won't have had the most delicious piece of sea bass I have ever had when I came to your place and you cooked it for me.
Well, I'm a sea angler, have been all my life. Love all that. I mean, really, James, if I wasn't doing politics, I think I'd probably run a small holding. You know, I keep ducks and geese, grow vegetables, go and catch a few fish, and just sort of go back to something very, very simple and very straightforward. But
I can remember it now.
Yeah.
The sea bass was absolutely delicious.
Well, there you are.
Absolutely delicious.
I've now been tipped as a chef. How about?
I'll tell you what, it is true. He catches his own fish, he preps it, and his Mrs. Law makes an amazing ceviche. It's one of the best perks of being a friend of Farage. You get the best seafood in town, freshly caught off the boat this morning. And I don't mean a migrant. Right, let's have... by the way, you can watch the full interview with James and Nigel. You don't want to miss it. It's on at 10 o'clock tonight, only on Talk. Right, let's have a chit-chat with Grace from London. Hello there, Grace.
Hi. Hope you're enjoying the sunshine.
Well, I'm in a studio right now looking out the window and I think it's holding, but I've heard there's downpours on their way, which ain't so good.
There'll need to be some rain for people's gardens at some point. I just was thinking... we're really fortunate to have been born into a culture that's been shaped by some positive values previously. I think about reading how prior to Christianity coming into Britain, the ancient Romans thought that it was okay to abuse women and girls. And we're lucky that we've been born into a society where we know that that's wrong. And obviously individuals around the world can be perfectly aware that that's wrong, regardless of their background. And within any culture, people have endlessly different views. So it's a mistake if some people, I'm not saying that you do this, but some people blame all of the negative things one hears about on every person who comes as an asylum seeker, because each asylum seeker is their own person. But I worry that actually, as a society, we are losing some of the values that we had, irrespective of people who are coming over here. I think we might like to presume that we're somehow better because we've got some good values here, but actually, we got those values because a particular man's teachings came and spread around here. Prior to that, a lot of people did behave in awful ways and think it was all right. And actually, it's not just about people coming from elsewhere. Increasingly, our society thinks that selfishness is okay, thinks that even lying is okay sometimes. I'm seeing more and more people upholding the idea that we should just do what we want. And so, irrespective of migration, we're losing some of the values that we had, because Christianity is not actually what your country is or what your heritage is. Christianity is choosing to follow a person who told us
Grace,
sacrificial.
I don't know if you've seen the incredible speech that Danny Kruger, the Conservative MP... Right. It's funny, that, isn't it? Because I saw that. My other half sent it to me because I'm a baptised church-going Christian, and I always say the late, great JC was the very first feminist for all of the reasons that you're saying. We've been built on Judeo-Christian values, this woke nastiness that has come into our world, into our culture, into our politics, which is all about individualism, deconstructing the legacy of those Judeo-Christian values that have done so much, not just for the progress of us in the United Kingdom, not just for the progress of the Western world, which adopted enthusiastically Christianity and Catholicism, but for the entire world. If you look at all the inventions that we have, a huge number came out of Britain, whether it's vaccines, the internet, computers, the steam engine. That was what we did. But the Western world, because Christianity celebrates innovation, whereas, frankly speaking, the modern Islamic culture, which is actually more medieval, hates the idea of democracy, hates the idea of science. They want everyone dragged back into some medieval hellhole. And we do need to address this issue. And you're right, it's not the only threat. One of the biggest threats are all of those neo-Marxists who would wish to dismantle the teachings of Christianity. And whether you go to church or whether you believe or not, that has done more to build our society and give us all of those freedoms and all of that peace and all of the democracy that has privileged us for so long. It's a brilliant point. Well made. Thank you ever so much to you. That was Grace in London. Right, a couple of your messages, and I'm going to give that James Whale interview another plug because we've got one more clip to play. Morning, Alex. Me and my friends go to Bristol and Leeds Carnival every year for the last 20 years. Never London. Too many people. As you say, do the street with the floats to the park like Hyde Park, where you can enjoy everything with stalls and venues and sound systems in one place. Yeah, why not? Wouldn't that make more sense? But no, that's racist. We all love you, James, says Michael. I know, mate, you're the one of the best. Talking about James Whale being one of the best geezers, actually, to use every single word in that text. He is going to be doing, well, he has done a big sit-down interview with Nigel Farage. It's going to be played exclusively tonight here on Talk at 10 o'clock. Let's see what's in store.
Thanks, Nigel.
James, you're a complete star.
I hope I've got more than a few weeks, but...
Well, so do I.
That's really made me...
So do I. And you never know, miracles do happen.
They do. They do.
Happen. Well, your career's been a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it has, considering I had no A-levels, O-levels, CSEs, Oh. Or even a letter after my name for broadcasting.
You said to me the other day, you've never really had a job.
I haven't.
Well, if James hasn't ever really had a job, have you, Mr. Collins?
No. Yeah, I have had a job, actually. No, I was just looking at that. I was just trying to remember back about 30 years ago when I first met James.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, he's obviously older than us, but when I was younger, a friend of mine said there's this TV show that's on. It was on in the Midlands, it was on in Yorkshire. It was his TV show that became the James Whale radio show, which was on TV. He said, you've got to watch this guy. He's incredible. And he sent some VHS videos down for me to watch because it wasn't on in the southeast. About a year later it was. And then, you know, you fast forward and you end up working with someone and then getting to know them and then they're your mate and then you drink with them and then you think, wow, I mean, as James said, I mean, what a life.
I've got a lot to give thanks to both of those men for. But James, Nigel, of course, enabled me to become an MEP in the Brexit Party, although I was his right-hand woman for a number of years. But when I was an MEP in the Brexit Party, James used to have me on his show, and it's James who said during the pandemic co-host with me when Ash is off, which I got to do live from Lanzarote, which was great.
The only thing I've got against James is that moment.
I know,